Chapter 733. It had already been half a month since the Shadow Alliance was signed. Many things had changed, but many things were still the same as before. 3 days after signing the Shadow Alliance, not only did the Holy Church not send any new reinforcements, some Knight squadrons and Angel squadrons that had suffered heavy losses were already retreating from San Antonio. It seemed that the Holy Church had reached some sort of secret agreement with Duke Barat. The Holy Church's forces retreated quite smoothly. The Holy Church's enemies simply watched as the Holy Church's forces retreated from the battlefield. And this was only the beginning. The Holy Church's forces began retreating from every battlefield, with the most elite Angel squadrons retreating the fastest. If this continued, San Antonio would soon be the only ones left on the battlefield to fight their own civil war. The Holy Church had given up on Prince Winston. Had they given up on San Antonio? All sorts of news and rumors were spreading everywhere. Pope Coloma made an announcement saying a bunch of nonsense like the Holy Church will forever protect San Antonio, and the God of Holy Light is watching over the land of Holy Light in order to appease the public. Of course, the government's words were always so heartwarming. At the very least, Pope Coloma's reputation as the representative of the Holy Light in the mortal world was quite high. Devout believers would still trust him. As for what happened afterwards, when the Civil War reached the point where only one side could survive, the survivors wouldn't care about what Coloma had said before, and that would no longer have anything to do with me. The popularity of magical engineering technology greatly reduced the distance between countries. Although airship tickets for cargo and passengers were quite expensive and limited to only a few major cities, my starting point and destination were both the capitals of powerful countries in the continent. It would be quite worth it to take a comfortable and safe airship. But as the war progressed, this new transportation route also met with a new threat. Along the way, our airship met more than 10 waves of flying magical beasts, a passing green dragon, and more than 10 aerial Knight squadrons. The green dragon and magical beasts were searching for food, while the aerial Knight squadrons were patrolling the countries along the way. The current world was far from peaceful, so the aerial Knight squadrons would keep an eye on every aerial target that passed by. But in the end, the magical beasts were driven away by the magic cannons. The green dragon and the aerial Knight squadrons followed us for a while before finally turning around and leaving. The close to 100 medium-sized magic crystal cannons on the giant floating ship were one reason, but the main reason was because of the chess pieces hanging on the ship. Barty's Dragonhead flag, the Mist Alliance's Stormwind Castle, the Ottoman Empire's crown flag, and the Fairy's listener symbol were the chess pieces hanging on the bow of this passenger airship. This represented that this tiny passenger airship was backed by 4 major organizations. The reason was simple. Only the Mist Alliance and Ottoman Empire possessed the technology to construct large airships capable of transporting goods and passengers across international borders. Neither of the Mist Alliance nor Ottoman Empire would miss out on such an excellent business opportunity. The vicious competition between the two factions had finally transformed into a cooperative monopoly. Not only would Barty be able to keep up appearances, there would also be an additional reason. The Fairies had also been invited to become a shareholder of Barty. Their intelligence and organizational abilities would be far too useful in the transportation industry. The Neutral Mist Alliance would be able to organize the transportation of goods and passengers. This would also allow the participating countries to lower their guard. At the very least, it would be far more reassuring than the gigantic organizations like Barty and the Mist Alliance. In this generation, aviation laws didn't exist at all. The concept of sea routes had only just been introduced. The sailors and captains of the airships were all highly experienced seafarers. Even the tools used to determine the direction and coordinates of the airships were the same ones used on the sea. It would be quite common for the airships to accidentally deviate from the sea route. This wouldn't be a big deal at sea, as the airships would simply turn around and return to their original location. But in a continent with no ruler, it would be a huge problem for an airship to trespass into another country's territory. Not only that, it would be an armed airship trespass, which might even cause a war. That was why we often saw aerial Knight squadrons following us. Perhaps it was because the Mist Alliance, Bardi, and Ottoman Empire's flags were sturdy enough, or perhaps these countries were already used to it. Most of the time, the aerial night squadrons would only follow us for a while and watch us leave the airship. There were other situations as well. Sometimes, the aerial night squadrons would board the airship of their own volition. Although this was more or less a form of supervision, it was also common to hear the night squadrons chat about their country's customs and customs. Some of the more cheerful ones would even perform for their guests. There was a dark-skinned Scorpion Knight who was also an excellent dancer. Her desert-style dance left a deep impression on me. This happened several times on the airship. Not only did the aerial night squadrons ease the tension of the passengers, it also made us look forward to the rest of the journey. Of course, judging from how the aerial night squadrons skillfully accepted red packets from the airship crew when they left, it was likely that they already had a contract with the Mist Alliance. Or perhaps they were simply there to appease their guests. At the very least, it seemed that long-distance passenger transportation between countries was a highly profitable business. I did a quick calculation. This airship would leave every 3 days, and there would be 300 to 400 passengers on board. There were several different grades of airship tickets, but the cheapest one would cost more than 2,000 gold coins. A VIP ticket would cost 10,000 gold coins each, which would be enough to buy a decent manor in the capital. Only major merchants or major nobles would be able to afford such a ticket. If nothing unexpected happened, they would probably be able to earn several million gold coins. This would be even more profitable than robbing a bank. However, it seemed that the expenses were quite high. Not to mention the depreciation of the airship. The world wasn't safe, and the magic crystal cannons and the permanent bodyguards on the airship were quite expensive. Over the past few days, I had seen 2 legends and 1 saint youngster. They were all wearing the armband of a public security officer, so they were probably the airship's bodyguards. However, when considering the current chaotic situation in Ike, perhaps this was already quite a good deal. The road tolls and checkpoints were quite disgusting. Some areas were battlefields, and forcefully passing through would be no different for suicide. Traveling on the air would be much less troublesome than traveling on land. After all, compared to flying magical beasts, deserters and bandits were far more dangerous. At the very least, it seemed that these airships had several major countries' flags, so the airships were 100% safe. The passengers were quite confident in their safety. This confidence had been tossed aside when the Green Dragon attacked, but reached its peak when the Green Dragon finally chose to leave. As expected of the Mist Alliance, even the dragons don't dare to touch their airship. It should be the Bardi Empire. Our country's Dragon Knight Squadron is famous all over the world. That dragon must be afraid of being hunted down by our country's Dragon Knight Squadron. Although that Bardi citizen's words caused all the Bardi citizens present to feel proud, I almost laughed out loud. After all, I understood the dragon language. Damn it, a flying metal can. I heard that meeting one will bring good luck. Metal can, please bless Natasha with accepting my love. Please bless me with many treasures. Please bless me with... That dragon's frightening roar was actually based on the newest rumor among the dragons. He prayed that he would meet with good luck and that he would leave in the end. This wasn't a decision made after weighing the pros and cons, but rather because he was satisfied with his wish. However, there were some things that these customers weren't wrong. Considering the special relationship between Bardi and the dragons, any domestic dragon that was connected to Dragon City wouldn't attack Bardi's airships. In fact, that rumor had been spread by Dragon City, which supported Bardi and Little Red's Dragon City. There was also a part of the rumor that attacking an airship would bring bad luck. However, this was also the truth. Dragon City would receive a share of this business as well. Attacking an airship would be the equivalent of cutting off the Dragon Queen and Dragon King's source of income. It would be strange if the wild dragons didn't suffer. This was another reason why Bardi had been dragged into this business. Of course, there was no such thing as absolute safety in this world. As the war progressed, accidents would occur sooner or later. Not everyone would be able to communicate with each other, such as running into a squadron of flying demons. However, as the war progressed, land travel would become even more difficult and dangerous. This business would always have potential. Having a secret agreement with the Holy Church also meant that this business could reach the Holy Church's sphere of influence. This would be a tremendous source of income. More income also meant more ammunition and food, which meant that the Mist Alliance's national power was growing by the day. Perhaps we were the most suited to the environment of the Holy War. There's a group of flying demons in front of us. Succubi and four-winged berserk demons. Warnings sounded in my ears as the sailors hurriedly urged the passengers on the deck to take shelter in the cabin. Meanwhile, Harlowe shot me a dissatisfied expression. You can blame me for this? Isn't this normal? The demon wave has ended, and the Chaos Abyss has entered an active period. There are countless Chaos Abyss gates now. We've encountered demon armies, demon lords, and so on. Old man over there, little girl, hurry and take shelter. Grandmaster Rakage, please attack. The magical radar has detected that a demon lord has appeared. All right then, I decided to shut up. Chapter 734. The beginning of the demon wave was a historical event, as well as a symbolic moment of the Holy War. It meant that the Chaos Abyss had successfully connected to the mortal plane. It would be incredibly difficult for any Chaos Abyss resident who wasn't in the Holy War to come to the mortal plane. Even if the Chaos Abyss residents managed to come to the mortal plane, they would be repeatedly weakened and might even be exterminated if they weren't careful. But now, not only was it easier to open the door to the mortal plane, the powerful demons that came wouldn't be suppressed by the dimensional laws. However, there were always losses to be gained. Previously, the dimensional laws had an upper limit and forcefully suppressed visitors from the Chaos Abyss. This meant that demon lords could only send out their incarnations, clones, or descendants. Even if they suffered losses in the mortal plane, they wouldn't be completely destroyed. But now, with the current situation, other demons were sending out their true bodies. Not only would it be embarrassing to send out an incarnation, one wouldn't even be able to get anything if they didn't have enough power. Being repeatedly attacked by others would also weaken one's source. Powerful mages could take advantage of this opportunity to attack the true body, steal its power, and enslave its true name. This obviously wasn't worth it. That was why all the demons that came were sending out their true bodies. However, the side effect of increasing one's power level was that the risks would greatly increase. Often, death would be a true death. The purgatory, soul-locking shark Shikblair was a powerful demon. He was a rather rare high-level demon that evolved from a scavenger shark from the river Styx. He looked just like a large black fish swimming in black mist. Only his bloodthirsty red eyes could be clearly seen in the black mist. He was quite frightening when he appeared at night. This type of creature loved to eat souls. Although it was impossible for them to enter the river Styx, they would always swim around the river Styx, waiting for an opportunity to ambush newborn demons that had just arrived at the river Styx. They would prey on the newborn demons' flesh and souls that hadn't completed their transformation. This was why they were called scavengers. Every creature would instinctively protect the young. Demons would always kill them on sight. The lucky survivors that managed to escape from the soul-locking shark's jaws would always remember to take revenge after they grew up. The fact that Shikblair was able to grow from an ordinary low-intelligence demon to a demon lord was evidence of how extraordinary he was. Currently, within his protective mist, black chains were restraining numerous wailing mortal souls. Fresh souls were his snacks, and the pitiful screams of despair made him feel even more delighted. As a great demon with the ability to fly, most of his subordinates were also flying demons. Unfortunately, the possibility of their growth in his race was too low. Most of his subordinates were winged demons and succubi. The former was a large category of demons. Those that had wings and could fly counted. Most of them were regular, muscular demons. Some were simply other demons that devoured flying demons and grew wings. Their appearances ranged from gorillas with wings to wolf-headed monsters with wings. However, if they chose the ability to fly, they would naturally lose weight and increase their wingspan. The melee combat abilities that demons were so proud of would naturally be weakened. Generally speaking, winged demons were not tricky to deal with. Generally speaking, When these erroneous evolution products reached senior level, they would grow a second pair of wings to improve their flying ability and upper limit of weight. The latter was a succubus, which was a rare humanoid creature among demons. There was probably no need to introduce her, since she was far too famous. A demon lord, a rare soul-shackle shark, 13 succubi, more than 200 miscellaneous winged demons, and a small team of specially evolved four-winged berserk demons. This is a little troublesome. The ordinary guests were all hiding in the warehouse, while the sailors and warriors were fighting on the deck of the airship. The magic crystal cannons on both sides of the airship kept firing. Although the demons were quite nimble in the air, there were very few results. The flying demon squadron had already caught up to the airship. It would be impossible for the slow airship to shake off their pursuit. However, the demons weren't in a hurry to attack, as they were observing the situation on our side. "Master, please make your move." The demon that the captain of the airship managed to shake off was a warrior monk named Rakage. Have the warrior monks protect the airship? Who would have such a genius idea? I felt that this plan was becoming more and more unreliable. Everyone knew that the warrior monks were experts in close combat. As long as the distance was close enough, it would be difficult for the warrior monks, who were experts in close combat, to use their mid-range and long-range weapons. I myself had once been beaten up by the undead warrior monks, and the earth elemental god Androkin was the strongest warrior monks I had ever seen. His melee combat skills were basically like cheating. It wasn't that the warrior monks weren't strong. In fact, even high-level warrior monks were ridiculously strong. However, this job class probably had the shortest attack range out of all the job classes. Hire them to protect the airship? How would they attack the airship? Energy wave or origin bullet? Rakage appeared to be in his 30s, and he seemed quite young when he smiled with squinted eyes. However, he was already at the saint rank. This didn't mean that he was a genius, but rather that the warrior monk's job class was capable of slowing down the aging process. However, he was currently squinting his eyes and meditating as if he had a card up his sleeve. No, perhaps Rakage has some special ability, such as a special bloodline or technique, such as a no-fly domain or a gravitational space. Perhaps Rakage even has a soul world. However, Harlois had a different opinion. Judging from how calm Rakage was, it seemed that he really did have some ability. The guards all came out. 1 saint rank, 3 legends, archers, swordsmen, mages, and even a bunch of silver and gold soldiers. Even gold, who used to be regarded as masters, could only be viewed as cannon fodder. It was truly amazing how the world had changed. Magic crystal cannons were quite powerful, but they were still a bit lacking when used against demons. Abyss creatures were born with excellent fire resistance, so it was quite common for them to resist explosions. Plus, demons were quite fast at flying, so these cannons wouldn't be much of a threat. In order to save money, it was also impossible for the airship to be equipped with escort airships to form a firepower system. In the end, it all depended on the regular guards. More than 10 winged demons were ordered to descend. They rashly attacked. Although this was only a probing attack, if they crashed into the wooden deck, they would definitely leave a hole in it. Rakage moved. He abruptly turned into a shadow, leaping and flashing continuously. Only the muffled sound of fists hitting flesh reverberated in the air. By the time he landed, the fallen demons had already become indistinguishable minced meat. Rakage then glared angrily at the demons that were still circling in the sky. The aura around him boiled, as if he was preparing for some ultimate attack. "You got guts. Get the hell down here." All right then, we were taking things for granted too early. Was this the new generation's taunting ability? It would seem that hiring warrior monks to guard the airship wasn't, because these warrior monks were special. If it wasn't for the fact that they were the only warrior monks available, it was likely that Rakage was simply trying to take advantage of the situation. After all, warrior monks were the cheapest to raise, and they didn't require any weapons or equipment. Warrior monks were the type who viewed life as bitter and self-tempering, so it would be the cheapest to hire them. Sometimes, Rakage would even only need to provide food and lodging. As expected, I can't take advantage of the situation. I even heard the mutterings of the man wearing a captain's hat. It would seem that this was how the advertisement for saint-ranked individuals to protect the airship came about. Since I was standing at the exit of the airship, how could warrior monks, who were skilled at training their senses, possibly not hear it? The middle-aged monk's face flushed red with anger, but he was unable to do anything about it. He could only viciously glare at the demons in the sky. The demons weren't in a hurry. Although they would have long since gone crazy for fresh flesh and souls, the recent days of hunting had already satisfied their instinctive desires. Now, they were more like a pack of wolves that moved for the pleasure of hunting. Unlike other demons, the soul-shackling shark Shikblair had no intention of staying in the mortal plane ever since he entered. He simply flew around as he pleased and enjoyed himself wherever he went. He would come down to hunt whenever he was hungry, and he would come down to hunt whenever he was free. The Lone Sky Night Knights were completely unable to stop him. The flying demons were roving bandits. Without a doubt, they were the most dangerous group of creatures. It would be impossible for ordinary villages to resist their attacks. Right now, the demons were circling around the airship. This was doubtlessly a type of test. If they met a powerful enemy, they would unhesitatingly turn around and flee. If they discovered that the enemy was no threat to them, there was likely that everyone on the airship would be finished. So what if the warrior monks were capable of fighting? As long as he could sink the airship, everyone on the airship would die. Honestly, next time, I'll definitely recommend that they bring in Sky Knight Knight. Even if they want to save money, they can't do this. Actually, if I didn't meet you, I probably wouldn't have met such an opponent. Harlow wanted to call me a jinx again, but I wasn't going to take the blame for that. Just how many levels are there in the endless chaos abyss? How many tens of thousands of demons are there? As the Holy War progresses, there will only be more and more demon hordes. Even if we didn't meet a demon this time, we'll meet a demon next time. It's already outdated to use the standards from 1 year ago. The demon wave has already ended, and we're already in the middle of the Holy War. Times were changing far too quickly. The standards that I had set yesterday might be outdated today. Even if my aura of misfortune increased the chance of accidents by 10 times, it would still be the same if I met a demon every 10 times. It would seem that the cost is going to increase. Wool comes from the sheep's back. Let's just double the price for the airship. Yep, in that case, let's just hire the dragons. They can even be used as a selling point to increase the price of the airship. I'll have a chat with Halent and Little Red when I get back. If we continue to save money, something will really happen. At such a time, it would be impossible for me to not take action. Sigh. I sighed, causing the air around me to tremble slightly. Everyone could hear my sigh, and then a violent wind started blowing as dark clouds gathered. Right after that, even though the weather was clearly getting warmer, snowflakes began to fall. The snowflakes suddenly transformed into a snowstorm. The wind suddenly became even stronger, and snow began to accumulate on the airship at a visible speed. Breaking through the bottleneck of semi-god meant that my physical body no longer had any limitations. This was a foundational improvement. My ice magic power had also greatly improved. Controlling the power of the elements would also require a correspondingly strong physical body. Semi-god was a major hurdle. At this point, even if my ice magic sword hadn't taken its final form yet, it wouldn't be like before, where I would have to rest for several months due to the recoil of magic from just casting a forbidden spell. This was the difference between mortals and non-humans. It was also the foundational reason why demons, angels, gods, and dragons were so unbelievably strong. Using their sayings, it would be that magic flows through my veins, my will can control the elements, and my anger can dispel any mortal's little toys. If a mortal's maximum elemental capacity was 10, then these gold tribes would be able to contain more than 100. The foundational difference in elemental mass meant that mortal spells wouldn't have much of an effect on them. This wasn't the first time I'd seen a dragon use its angry roar to dispel a mage's spell. This fact gave them the right to look down on mortals. They had the right to do as they pleased. Before reaching semi-god, humans would only end up killing themselves if they messed around, just like lifting a truck with their physical body. Perhaps it would be possible for a short period of time, but if they weren't careful, they would end up killing themselves. After becoming a semi-god and fusing with the highest level angel bloodline, I was definitely no ordinary semi-god. The power of the war angel incarnation had truly merged into my physical body. If the red dragon's elemental mass was over 100, then my elemental mass was at least over 1,000. Let's try it out. Ice magic gathered in my hands. Just as I was about to test out the power of my ice magic sword, the airship suddenly tilted, and I almost fell over. I heard a sailor's exclamation outside the window. The airship tilted. The engine on the left has stopped working because of the snow. I paused in surprise, and the power of ice and snow in my hands naturally dissipated. Harloise was tugging on my clothes in order to prevent herself from falling over. She and I exchanged glances. I'm sorry. I don't know what kind of expression I should have at a time like this. Just embarrass yourself, just like always. The silly cat smile made me want to toss her out of the airship. Meanwhile, a white-haired female mage hurriedly rushed over. As a legend-rank mage, she would be far too weak if she couldn't sense the magical waves of a spell that was so close to her. Master Harloise, please stop casting your spell. The airship won't be able to handle it. This mage, who was so old that she was about to die, noticed that my face was covered in wrinkles. She paused in surprise for a moment before asking me to stop casting my spell. She even asked me to go to the deck and help her. I was already feeling rather helpless. Nothing had been going well for me recently. It was impossible for me to hide in the airship's cabin and solve the problem. I casually tossed aside my walking stick and suddenly grew taller. My aura and physical appearance simultaneously changed as I instantly transformed from an old man into a young man. I cracked my neck and felt much more comfortable. You actually want a passenger to protect themselves? You really should return the airship ticket. Why do I remember that you asked for a ticket from a local messenger? You didn't even spend any money. The silly cat continued to make fun of me, as always. I directly ignored her attempts to convince me. Then I'll compensate you for the psychological damage I caused. I've been so poor recently. Since I can't cast a large-scale spell, then I'll use the Ice Magic Sword's Death Arena rules. We're going to fall off. 7 deadly sins? All the other passengers will die, and will still fall off. Or can you control those vengeful spirits so that they don't harm anyone? I felt even more helpless now. I decided not to take an airship next time. It would be quite troublesome to even attack in such a special space. It would be fine if a group of succubi, winged demons, and other small demons came, but if a chaos main god blocked the airship, I haven't even said it yet, and you're not even letting me think about it? I did my best to pry away the silly cat's hand that was covering my mouth. Was I such a jinx? She wasn't even letting me think about it. Roland, come out. I already knew that you'd be on this airship. I've been waiting for you for a long time. This voice sounded rather familiar. Sophocles the Deceiver? It's Sophocles the Deceiver. Chapter 735. Sophocles had 2 wings, 2 horns, and a dark gray body that was quite fit. He had hands and feet, and he carried a great sword on his back. Sophocles' murky yellow eyes contained complex emotions. He stared at me with eyes that were even larger than mine. His gaze was filled with vigilance. Apart from the fact that he was slightly larger than me, there was nothing special about him. The airship isn't even as large as his fist. Are you sure that you call that slightly larger? TSK, so what if he's large? Who knows if he's just an embroidered pillow? Sophocles' gigantic head approached the airship's deck, and he breathed out a breath that sounded like lava from hell. However, this breath was actually just the breath of a gigantic demon. Roland, you're still the same as before. Sophocles' voice almost blew me away. The saint-ranked warrior monks and legends around me were all stunned by his demonic aura and couldn't move at all. All right, a large one is indeed amazing. This was different from the day when I met Sophocles at the Hades. Back then, I had the 4 elemental pillars behind me and countless powerful subordinates. Even main gods could be used as cannon fodder. But now, Sophocles' true body had arrived. He was a mega existence capable of destroying an entire country or even an entire continent. Sophocles' gigantic body reached the clouds just by standing up straight. Just judging by his size, this schemer who was skilled at trickery and deception seemed to be even larger than Donati's, the chaos war god. He seemed more like a war god. Long time no see, Aphu. What business do you have with me? Aphu? No, I'm Sophocles, the venerated chaos main god Sophocles. The demon main god instantly exploded. The smell of sulfur made me feel like I was inside a volcano. The airship's deck started creaking as cracks spread at a visible rate. TSK, TSK, TSK. Your temper is just as bad as before, Aphu. Sophocles. I'm Sophocles the Deceiver, Sophocles the Deceiver, the idol of all deceivers and schemers, the wisest demon Sophocles. All right, Aphu. I shook my head at this guy. Sophocles Ilastankovin gasped. I almost said my true name. I know you. This is your scheme. You want to trick me into revealing my true demon name. What kind of evil spell is this? Even the wise Sophocles almost fell for it. I sighed helplessly. Apart from using exclamation marks, this fellow also seemed to have delusions. Why didn't I realize that he was so funny back then? Afu, you're a great demon, yet you say others are evil? It's just that your IQ is low, Afu, right? Afu, how are you, Afu? Have you eaten, Afu? How's your mother? Afu. The great demon slapped its face with its claws, and the sound was like thunder. The black fish overlord behind him was trembling as it hid behind him, but disaster fell from the sky. The demon lord's claw landed, and the demon overlord was thrown into his mouth. Gotcha. Sure enough, when you're in a bad mood, you have to eat a lot. Afu chewed with big mouthfuls and only calmed down after a long time. When he opened his eyes again, the red light in his eyes had returned to normal. He had already calmed down. Afu, do you still remember the feeling of being surrounded and beaten up by the abyss dragons? Huh. Just as I was about to continue teasing him, our small talk was interrupted. The white-haired female, mage, was pitifully tugging on my clothes. My lord, your highness Roland. She pointed at the crumbling airship, which was now full of cracks, as she begged me with tears in her eyes. Please stop teasing, Afu. You're fine, but we can't take it anymore. My lord Afu, no, my lord Sophocles, please don't look at me like that. Please don't steal my soul. The white-haired female mage's legs kept trembling as the demon lord viciously stared at her. She was about to pee. Air, the ground, and her mage robe were all wet. It would seem that she had peed already. As a gentleman, it would be best for me to pretend that I didn't see anything. And so, I gave her a thumbs up and turned around to smile at the chaos main god who was glaring at me angrily. Good job, young lady. You're so fearless. I have high hopes for you. Come, let's pee together in front of the demon lord. As I said that, I really started taking off my pants in front of Sophocles. What? I wasn't a gentleman enough? A true gentleman wouldn't care about such senseless etiquette. I was using practical actions to alleviate the young lady's embarrassment. Since she was already dirty, then everyone else should be dirty together. That would make it seem like she wasn't too dirty. Well, at least in theory, wouldn't it? Roland, don't even bother trying to anger me. I, Sophocles, am no newbie. I won't lose my rationality over such a small level of provocation. Before saying that, please let go of the pitiful succubus and four-winged berserk demon that you twisted into a dough twist. Also, take care of the pressure that you were emitting. Those demons were all killed by you. I chuckled and stopped teasing Afu. Sophocles' guess was correct. From the very start, I had been trying to anger Afu. Anger was a very interesting emotion. On the battlefield, some people would become more ferocious and powerful because of anger, while others would reveal flaws and become weaker. If I wasn't mistaken, Afu and I were both the latter. We were warriors who used our brains to calculate. Losing our rationality would only cause flaws in our traps and strategies, greatly weakening our combat strength. Perhaps angering Sophocles would indeed be rather difficult, but there was nothing wrong with trying. Even if I couldn't completely anger him to the point of losing his rationality, too much anger would still subconsciously affect the accuracy of my actions and the stability of my thoughts. That's right. I was already fully prepared for battle. From the moment that I saw Sophocles, I knew that it would be difficult for today's battle to end peacefully. I was already prepared for a cruel battle to the death. Demons were definitely no good people. Things like Night Spirit or fair duels were nothing more than jokes. Demons would unhesitatingly eliminate any enemy that could threaten them. From the moment that the demon wave arrived, I knew that a demon lord would come knocking on my door sooner or later. However, I never expected that Sophocles would be the first to come. I had thought that Sophocles was someone who was used to scheming. Rather than personally taking action, he would feel that using someone else to do his dirty work would be a better way to show off his intelligence and tactics. I had originally thought that someone like Donades would come knocking on my door first. I didn't expect that it would be Aphew, who had already suffered several times at my hands. The dawn holy light sore at my waist was humming slightly. It seemed that the prey before it was far too suitable for its taste. Since I already knew that a demon lord would come knocking on my door sooner or later, of course I would be prepared. This dawn holy light sword was definitely a demon's natural enemy. It was always best to use a trump card or trump card the first time it appeared. My dawn holy light sword was truly fortunate to be able to use Aphew, the impersonator, as a sacrifice. I placed my right hand at my waist as my entire body faintly glowed with holy light. I had a smile on my face as I prepared myself for a battle to the death. Holy light. However, Aphew suddenly took a step back. Take a look at the situation around you. Do you think that they'll be able to survive if we attack? Black smoke was rising from every part of the airship. The deck and the body of the airship were covered in cracks. The powerful guards on the airship were all lying on the ground. Just being in close contact with a chaos main god was far too difficult for them. If even these powerful individuals were in such a state, then it was likely that the ordinary people in the airship's cabins were already heavily injured or dead. Order main gods had their own personal domains of order. Demons at the level of demon lord or higher would have the twisted power of chaos that would instinctively corrode the surrounding environment. This was just as normal as breathing for them. However, it was already too much for ordinary people to bear. Of course I could see it. I had been paying attention all this time, but what could I do? Actually, I can return what you just said to me. I, Roland, am no newbie. Do you really think that these people can be used as hostages to restrain me? From the moment that you appeared, they were dead for sure. At most, I'll find a chance to make it up to their families and then attack you even more viciously. I smiled as I said my threat, but it was the truth. I would never hold back against the chaos main god. Rather than having so many misgivings about restraining myself from attacking and dying because of the chaos main gods, I would rather pretend that they didn't exist. At most, I would make it up to them in the end. If a chaos main god came, they would die. That would be all. We didn't hide our conversation from others. The guards who hadn't died, yet were looking at me with rather complex expressions. They probably looked at me with hatred and even fear. From a certain standpoint, choosing to board this airship was the cause, and their deaths were the effect. Their hatred wasn't without reason. Did they have no way to survive? No, they did. And right now, I was trying to fight for their survival. You use holy light to break through to semi-god? I lightly flicked the hilt of my sword, causing the blade of holy light to shine with a pure light that lit up the entire world. Fu took another step back, this time due to his demon instincts. Yeah, I knew that you would come looking for me sooner or later, so of course I had to use holy light to break through. Right now, I'm probably the strongest holy light knight in the entire world. Fu hesitated for a moment, but finally did his best to squeeze out a smile that was even uglier than crying. Actually, I didn't come here today to fight you. I have some things to discuss with you. I chuckled. Was that really the case? Sophocles' personality wasn't the type to personally fight to begin with. Even if he really wanted to fight me, he definitely would have done so already. How could he possibly let me come out of my cabin and give me time to prepare? And if I showed even the slightest bit of fear or guilt, he definitely wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. At the very least, a probing battle would be unavoidable. Only if I acted like I was willing to kill him at all costs, and had an ace card in my hand that he couldn't see through would he give up on probing me and directly talk business with me. Angering him and forcing him to attack was actually because I had seen through his suspicious personality. I acted like I was confident in killing him, scaring him into not attacking or even probing me. That was the only chance for the passengers to survive. And since I was fighting for that chance for them, Foo, let's talk somewhere else. Sophocles. I'm Sophocles, not some damned Foo. All right, Foo. I'll remember Foo. No need to repeat yourself, Foo. You bastard who deserves to be burned to death by holy light. Do whatever you want. Chapter 736. From a certain standpoint, when I discovered that Sophocles hadn't come here in order to kill me, at least his main goal wasn't to kill me, I understood what was going on. What could a demon lord possibly want to discuss with me? The weather was nice today. Were we going on a field trip? Right now, they were only interested in more slaughter and souls in order to better occupy more territory in the mortal plane. Looking at it from a more distant perspective, they were more interested in how to obtain more power, a higher status, and a larger territory. Weren't they similar to wild beasts? The law of the jungle and the chaos abyss had indeed created a large number of intelligent forest beasts. Although Sophocles was known as the most cunning demon and the demon closest to the devil himself, he was still a demon in the end. I knew better than anyone what demons wanted and needed. Aphew, do you want to kill that demon lord and need my help? Yes, I felt that Sophocles was definitely here to sell out his teammates. After all, for demon lords, their true mortal enemies were never existences from the mortal plane, but rather the residents of the chaos abyss who were just like them. In the chaos abyss, the demon lords would forever be at war. In terms of grudges and conflicts of interest, the demon lords were the true mortal enemies. As for the war against the mortal plane, from a certain standpoint, describing the holy war as a war between countries might be quite appropriate for the Order faction, but it would be rather hilarious for the Chaos faction. For the Order faction, this was nothing more than a hunt. They only cared about what they could obtain. Thinking about the overall situation, sacrificing for the overall situation, what a joke. If I sacrificed myself, who would compensate me? I was thinking about the overall situation, but did those bastards know how to think? In the long run? Do we have a long run? The territory in this war would belong to whoever obtained it first. From the very start, the Chaos faction couldn't even be called loose sand. They were a bunch of bastards who would attack their allies at any moment. This was the foundational reason why the Order faction, which was far weaker than the Chaos faction, was able to maintain such a subtle balance. Of course, the Order faction wasn't much better off. The Holy Church had just sold out San Antonio and even built a defensive line against the Mist Alliance in the Northlands. I couldn't even remember how many times I had made the Holy Church suffer. I had just been killed by an angel a few days ago. But at the very least, we were still allies. Even if we backstabbed each other before going to bed, as long as we didn't die the next day, we could still smile and eat breakfast together. Is this a comparison of who's worse? Indeed, this is a comparison of who is worse. Most things in this world are about comparing who's worse, especially war. Isn't it about who gets toyed to death first and who makes more mistakes? Compared to the Chaos Abyss, the Order faction was already doing quite well. At the very least, there were still faint rules and moral restrictions between us, so we wouldn't be eaten up by the wolves if we revealed any flaws. Compared to the Chaos faction, the Order faction had a direct and bloody conflict with the faction had. The Order faction was the same. The Order faction, Chaos faction was the faction. Their conflict of interest with the mortal plane's residents was direct and bloody. This was the relationship between the predator and the prey, as well as the relationship between the aggressor and the invaded. Anyone who had anything to do with demons was destined to become public enemy number one. With such a major background, Sophocles definitely wouldn't be looking for me to come to an agreement with him to deal with a certain mortal plane faction or individual. Even if his target was the Holy Church, I still wouldn't possibly agree to help him. This was the general direction of the Holy Church, and there would be no end of trouble if I went against it. That's why you came looking for me again. Since you're not going to fight to the death with me, you're going to make me suffer. Sophocles stood in front of me. This time, he was a dark-skinned, middle-aged gentleman with two horns on his head and gold-rimmed spectacles that pretended to be refined. There was also a white wooden table and a parasol in front of him. Sophocles was still pretending to be a refined scholar in his human form as he sipped tea while reading a newspaper. Hearing me say so, he frowned. What is this? Betray a teammate? We weren't teammates from the very beginning. After a while, Sophocles organized his thoughts and stated his goal. Great sovereign Cavendish is too dangerous. Sophocles began his story with such words. Just what exactly had Cavendish done for a chaos main god who viewed destruction as a daily occurrence to say that it was dangerous? He's trying to break the barrier of the entire HE universe. It was not Sophocles who said it, but I said it in an affirmative tone. I believed that I already knew why Sophocles had come. Sophocles paused in surprise for a moment, but then he had an expression as if he expected that I already knew what was going on. Mortal, in my countless years, I've seen many outstanding geniuses. However, I've never seen anyone like you and your brother. Even Roland from back in the day wasn't as ridiculous as you. You've grown to such a degree in less than 400 years. As expected, any undying existence would love to start talking about the past whenever they started chatting. Even demons were no exception. A short 400 years? Do you know what I've experienced in the past 300 years? I chuckled and didn't respond, because I knew that he wouldn't care at all about what a mortal had experienced. My next topic was the main point of this demon who was skilled at scheming. Not long ago, Sophocles and Cavendish had allied together to plot against San Antonio. But now, he had immediately betrayed me. Naturally, he had obtained something. I'm not an immemorial demon who experienced the First Holy War. However, I once devoured an immemorial demon and learned from their memories just how powerful and frightening the invaders from other planes were. I don't want to meet such a powerful enemy like the ones in my memories. According to Sophocles' description, the immemorial invaders from other planes were powerful and frightening. They destroyed everything they went through, turning cities into ruins and the people into food. Wasn't this exactly the same as what demons did? It would seem that Sophocles didn't want any competitors to join his side. What he shouldn't have done the most is attempt to open up the entire dimensional barrier. Things like true evolution or surpassing the limits of the creator goddesses are fine with saying such beautiful things to the little demons of the new generation, but to say such nonsense to me, Sophocles started talking. He was filled with complaints and anger. Perhaps it was rare for a demon main god to have any sense of reason at all. Sophocles was having quite a difficult time among all his crazy and ridiculous companions. I wouldn't take his complaints seriously, but judging from the current situation, he was determined to kill Cavendish in order to eliminate the threat of the dimensional barrier being opened. Even a demon wanted to save the world? Wasn't this a bit wrong? Sophocles naturally thought of me in order to kill off the incredibly difficult and bottomless Cavendish. According to Sophocles, there was another chaos main god who had promised to kill off that maniac. As long as Sophocles found an opportunity to ambush Cavendish, it would be impossible for Cavendish to win. And now that Sophocles said this, it was doubtless that I already had the same status as a chaos main god in Sophocles' eyes. I wanted Sophocles' information support, but I didn't want to simply become his fighter, which was why I hesitated. Chapter 737. Cooperating with a demon would obviously be the same as asking a tiger for its skin. No matter what the plan was, and whether or not we succeeded in killing off Cavendish, we would definitely end up having a fierce battle against him. Still, it would be quite a pity if I refused to cooperate with Sophocles. Sophocles had accurate information on Cavendish, which was exactly what I needed the most right now. While I was hesitating, the next instant, a gigantic claw suddenly descended from the sky and attacked me. Unfortunately, Sophocles had only attacked Sophocles' shattered incarnation. Sophocles' true body hadn't even moved at all. Sophocles' true body hadn't moved at all. From the very start, we hadn't been talking about Sophocles' true body. I silently stood in the clouds and looked down at Sophocles, who was still sipping tea. It would seem that the time had come. This attack was only a signal. Some things didn't need to be said too clearly. No matter whether or not I agreed to join Sophocles' plan, I would need to display a certain amount of combat strength in order to have the right to speak. This was one of the rules of communication between the Chaos Lords. Since I had so sincerely stated my request first, Sophocles was currently testing out my personal power level after making my breakthrough to see if I had the right to speak on equal terms with him. However, if I appeared too weak or revealed an opening, Sophocles would happily kill me. Of course, it was the same the other way around as well. How could I possibly miss out on a chance to kill off this powerful demon before me? Actually, since Sophocles had blocked my path today, this battle was unavoidable. You won't be satisfied if you don't test my strength. Although this battle had turned from a life-and-death battle into a test, the danger level hadn't decreased at all. The moment I revealed an opening or an obvious difference in power level, it would instantly become a life-and-death battle again. Holy light gathered around me as I took a deep breath. I gripped my dawn holy sword with both hands and fully unfurled my angelic wings behind my back. For angels, wings weren't only for decoration or for flight. Their true purpose was to store and absorb even more power of order. From a certain standpoint, the number and quality of an angel's wings represented the upper limit of an angel's power of order. The more powerful an angel was, the stranger their wings would appear. 2 wings, 4 wings, 6 wings, 12 wings, metal wings, light wings, scorching wings, dragon knights, floating cannons. It seemed like all sorts of random things had been mixed in, but angels had all sorts of wings based on their rank and position. From a certain standpoint, this was indeed a type of functional organ. Their most basic ability was to absorb the power of order from the upper planes in order to replenish themselves and increase their combat strength. That was why their wings were always faintly glowing, and they were highly skilled in prolonged battles. I took a deep breath as I absorbed an endless amount of holy light from the upper planes. The entire world was bathed in golden light. Compared to the past, the gathering speed of holy light was at least 10 times faster. Previously, when I transformed into a war angel, it didn't change the essence of my life form. But now my bloodline could give me actual power. War Angel was the name of my order angel bloodline. On the ancient tree of power ranks, this wasn't a regular type of ancient angel. Instead, it was an honorable title given to ancient angels by the creator goddesses in certain domains. Its name explained the characteristics of this type of angel. There was no other reason than that War Angel was skilled in combat. As the top-level warriors of the Order faction, War Angel's greatest reliance was their ability to use the power of order. What else could possibly increase their combat strength more than the endless power of order? From a certain standpoint, this pair of faintly glowing golden wings was also a top-level myth-ranked weapon that specialized in absorbing and increasing the power of order. I could even faintly sense that the entrance to the upper planes where I was absorbing the power of holy light was located at the core of the Heaven's Pillar, Pillar of Order. The Heaven's Pillar was equivalent to the river Styx and was the source of all power of order. It was also the only river of light that existences outside of souls couldn't possibly come into contact with. It would seem that the goddess of order had cheated yet again to be able to absorb the purest power of order from the Heaven's Pillar of Order. The entire sky was illuminated by holy light. My wings had now transformed into grand wings of light that were comparable in length to battleships. However, I still didn't feel like I had reached my limit. Since I had the authority of a certain creator god, perhaps the amount of holy light I could absorb wouldn't be as much as a pure order god, but the quality of my holy light would likely be much higher. With a tremendous amount of holy light supporting me, my Dawn Holy Light sword's blade of light was endlessly extended. This design was also what I relied on to slay large demons and undead. Second mode. The runes on the sword's hilt were ignited, and 5 small parts flew out from it. One flew high up into the sky at high speed, while the other 4 flew out in all directions and occupied the 4 corners of the sword. Meanwhile, I, who wielded my Dawn Holy Light sword, was freely emitting holy light, becoming a true source of light. Endless amounts of holy light shot out. Every time it shot out, it would strengthen itself. This was a special domain created by the light mirror. The holy light became even hotter and more dangerous under the effects of the light mirror's amplification. The power of pure holy light was purifying and correcting this domain. The next instant, as a connection of light was established, I was no longer the only source of light. Above me and all around me, 5 other sources of light simultaneously lit up. The entire world was baptized by holy light. Even someone as powerful as Sophocles instantly became blind under this unprecedented baptism of holy light. The demons' gigantic and strong bodies gave them an even larger area of illumination. The continuous pure holy light would purify and weaken all non-order powers within this area. Perhaps it wouldn't be as domineering as the original holy light, but this continuous weakening effect would be even more effective when facing a powerful enemy. Powerful demons had the unique power of chaos distortion. They were able to instinctively transform their surroundings into the chaos abyss, turning it into their home turf. Meanwhile, my holy light domain was capable of erasing the traces of chaos without consuming any energy. Sophocles' gigantic body actually became his weakness. The high density of holy light in the air was currently dissolving his body like acid. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to threaten the chaos main god for a short period of time, but this continuous weakening effect would be endless. If only I had the complete version of my Northland's magic sword, ice magic sword, and 2 of my magic swords, I would be able to try and make Sophocles stay here forever. I didn't want to immediately reveal my trump cards, nor did I want to use my trump card when I wasn't confident in being able to kill Sophocles. But since my opponent was an existence like Sophocles, holding back would be the same as committing suicide. The spreading of holy light here was only the beginning. Even more holy light was gathering on my dawn sword. The concept of gathering light transformed my sword into a fatal needle of light. When the power of holy light was gathered to the extreme, my sword of light would have the power to slay a god. My sword of light had already extended to several hundred meters in length. However, I was still holding it tightly in my hand. It was just that I was now pointing my sword at the demon main god's core. Gather, gather, gather even more. Forbidden spells that spread out are meaningless against existences at the level of a chaos main god. Only the purest power of order, compressed to the extreme, will be able to pierce through their defenses and destroy their vitals, their demon hearts. Roar! The demon main god angrily roared at the sky as distorted power of chaos gushed out like a volcano. Black mist and lava covered his body in an attempt to resist the holy light's baptism. The demon main god held the great sword on his back in his hand. However, it fused together with his flesh and blood. The great sword that was as large as a mountain was covered in a thick blood-red light. When the demon main god grasped his true power, the entire world seemed to tremble in fear. The demon main god took a deep breath as endless power of chaos surged out from beneath the ground. He had already connected himself to the chaos abyss at all costs. The entire land trembled and collapsed as everything returned to chaos. On the pitch-black land, the chaos main god became even more ferocious as his gigantic body expanded by another 30%. His greatsword was now powerful enough to slice apart any mountain. Finally, he moved. The demon main god swung his greatsword, which was even larger than his physical body, towards the sky. The demon main god's footsteps created an earthquake. The blood-red light caused his greatsword to suddenly extend. The blood-red light even pierced through the clouds. When I saw this sword, I knew that no matter what angle I tried to dodge, this sword would still collide with my lightsaber in the end. This seemed to be faintly related to karma. This demon main god, who was famed for being sly, was actually an incredibly outstanding sword saint. Sophocles had successfully connected himself to the chaos abyss. This sword attack would affect the power of chaos in the chaos abyss. Damn it, wasn't this supposed to be a test? Why are you trying so hard? It's not like I can kill you. At most, I'll make you go back to the chaos abyss and sleep for a few hundred years. Currently, Sophocles was also cursing inwardly. Wasn't this supposed to be a test? Why was he using a nuclear bomb as his trump card right from the start? He was using a powerful attack right from the start? What kind of test was this? Of course, Sophocles didn't know that Roland, who had just broken through to Chaos Abyss, only had this trump card that was specifically meant to deal with demons. This was a holy light nuclear bomb that he had prepared to deal with any main god. Both sides were worried that the demon main god would turn the test into an ultimate attack. The result was that the demon main god would be fighting at full power right from the get-go. Sophocles used a powerful attack right from the start, but the other side was still holding back. Was Sophocles just waiting to die? Sophocles regretted his rashness. His goal was only to test whether or not Roland had a trump card that could threaten a demon main god. Not only did Roland have a trump card that could threaten a demon main god, Roland even used it on himself. If Sophocles had known that this would be a fight to the death right from the start, he wouldn't have been foolish enough to die together with Roland. But right now, whoever stopped first will be giving the initiative to their opponent, which would be suicidal. Asterisk, buzz, buzz, buzz. Asterisk, when the extended pure white sword of light clashed with the blood-red light, the entire world was filled with a buzzing sound. After a moment of silence, a giant gray pillar of light shot up into the sky. This was a gigantic pillar of light that extended endlessly. Even the airship that had left several hours ago could clearly see this pillar of light reaching into the sky. The next moment, the pillar of light continued to extend even higher, while an even more fatal shockwave began to spread. This shockwave would transform this wasteland into a completely uninhabited area. The power of order and chaos kept clashing and exploding. Even the creatures buried underground would be corroded and baptized. The shockwave kept spreading out as if it would never end. Even the airship that was several dozen kilometers away was barely surviving from the shockwave, becoming even more pitiful and damaged. They should be thankful. If they were still on the ground right now, they probably would have lost their lives already. Perhaps even a few decades later, this place would still be completely barren. Just like the holy wars of the past, this wasteland, which had once been the battlefield of main god-level powerhouses, would be recorded in history. It would be completely destroyed. Perhaps in a few years, strange new species would appear here, just like the ancient battlefields of the past. At the same time that the shockwave exploded, both sides had vanished without a trace. 20 minutes later, a charred black body landed on the deck of the airship. His entire body had been burned pitch black and fiery red. Chaos and order were still clashing on his physical body. Distorted blood-red mist was still corroding his charred physical body. Anything that got close to his body would either be directly corroded or set on fire. The nearby guards were astonished and hurriedly went to get water to extinguish the fire. However, someone discovered that the person who just landed seemed rather familiar. Isn't that His Highness Roland, who just left? Why is he cooked? As expected of the undying Roland, he's still alive even after being cooked. Wow, he can even glare at people. Chapter 738. The strongest holy knight fiercely battled against Chaos, main god Sophocles, and successfully injured him. Sophocles has been driven out of the mortal plane. The fairies wouldn't miss such a shocking piece of information. One day later, all the newspapers and magazines had this piece of information on the headlines. Some accurate information stated that Sophocles had fallen into the chaos abyss with burns all over his body. His injuries were definitely serious, and it was likely that he would need to rest for several hundred years. This was doubtlessly a major victory for the Chaos faction. It was likely that the Chaos faction would be the first main god-level powerhouse to suffer such a heavy injury. This was especially so since all the other battlefields were in shambles. Such a victory was even more encouraging. Since the demon wave was unstoppable and the Chaos War god's unstoppable destruction was still fresh in everyone's memory, Sophocles' defeat was doubtlessly a major victory. At the very least, Sophocles proved that even a Chaos main god could be defeated, and defeated by a single individual. The entire world was praising this major victory while selectively ignoring the dark history of the strongest holy knight. It wasn't that no one doubted the veracity of this information. However, the nameless wastelands had now become a dangerous battlefield filled with dimensional cracks. The traces of power that defied common sense doubtlessly proved how fierce and real the battle had been. For a time, even more people had a favorable opinion of the Mist Alliance. After all, high-level combat strength would always be the foundation for comforting people. Perhaps he wouldn't be of much use on the battlefield, but at the very least, he wouldn't allow the enemy's powerful individuals to slaughter the Mist Alliance. In this aspect, the Northlands had always been at a disadvantage. Before the gods of the Hades had appeared, the Mist Alliance's top-level combat strength had indeed been far inferior to the Holy Light factions. But now, this weakness had been made up for. The Holy Church was probably the most embarrassed to hear this news. This was not just illusory things like the comparison of strength and honor. Holy Knight was humanity's protector. This was probably common knowledge to everyone. Although this job was difficult, poorly paid, risky, and had a terrible working environment, the Holy Knight's reputation in the human world was top-notch. You could dislike the Holy Church and expel Holy Light believers, but you still had to maintain sufficient respect for a Holy Knight. Although the righteous Holy Knights were strict to others and even stricter to themselves, they would always be able to inspire and unite people in times of danger. This was the same reason why people would usually hate the police, but when something horrible happened, they would lean towards them. There will always be someone who isn't stubborn and smelly. You don't like him, but you need him and trust him. From a certain standpoint, the title of the strongest Holy Knight was also the title of the strongest protector of human society. This title wasn't just an honor, it was also a duty. It had always been exclusive to the Holy Church. Being called the strongest wasn't just a kind of vanity that came from comparison. Instead, it meant that when he was here, you could peacefully enter your dreams, because no one could defeat him. No matter how dangerous the situation was, as long as the tree didn't arrive, everything would be at ease. This was the feeling that Estrada gave people when he was still in the Holy Church. The most righteous Holy Knight, the fairest Holy Knight, the oldest Holy Knight. There were many titles, but none of them were as reassuring as the strongest Holy Knight. The strongest individuals in other job classes would never be able to obtain such trust. This sort of reassuring effect was doubtlessly what the current chaotic world needed the most. After Estrada's death, several top-level Holy Knights tried to wear this title as publicity. Their power levels weren't weak at all, and they were indeed Estrada's disciples in terms of inheritance. However, they needed time and combat results to prove their abilities. But now, they no longer needed to try proving their abilities. Being able to defeat a Chaos main god in a direct battle, or even just forcing him to retreat, was already something that far surpassed the comprehension of mortals. Even Estrada back in the day might not have been able to do this. The strongest Holy Knight Roland missed. Perhaps there have been people who doubted his claim to be the strongest Holy Knight back in San Antonio, as well as the fact that he claimed to have obtained the inheritance of the Guardian Hammer. But now, all doubts had vanished. He, Roland Mist, had doubtlessly inherited the title of strongest Holy Knight. However, this wasn't necessarily a good thing for the Holy Church. That was because several months ago, this strongest Holy Knight had just killed the god of Holy Light's right-hand man, the Blazing Angel. Some things couldn't be made public. Roland and the Holy Church would forever be enemies rather than allies. When considering the Yongya era and the Mist Kingdom's messy affairs, no matter how nice the relationship between me and the Holy Church sounded, the most I could say was that we were on good terms. But behind the scenes, I really wanted nothing more than to kill the Holy Church. In that case, the Holy Church would probably be in the most awkward situation right now. The Holy War system that the Holy Church had worked so hard to create was no match for the contract hero system that was driven by benefits. The Holy Light's legitimacy was being questioned, and even the Holy Light's guardian honor seemed to be getting further and further away from the Holy Church. Of course, I wasn't in the mood to think so much right now, nor did I know that the fairies were participating. The entire world was either astonished, cheering, or jumping for joy over this news. Damn Sophocles, he attacked me so heavily. From a certain standpoint, that passenger airship named Forward had helped me out greatly. If I had been lying in the wastelands covered in heavy injuries, I didn't know how much trouble that would have caused. I really had to thank my special trait of being unable to be detected. Otherwise, people would have found me long ago and turned me into dust. I need to recover from my injuries again. This time, it'll take several months. I fell into deep thought as I lay in the captain's cabin and gazed at the unfamiliar ceiling. Could it be that I had some sort of destiny with airships? I had to be hospitalized the moment I boarded. Fine, I was just making things up. My injuries this time seemed quite serious, but they were actually only some flesh wounds. After becoming a semi-god, one's physical body's recovery abilities would greatly increase. Normally, it would still take several months to recover. However, as someone who wielded the power of holy light, as long as they didn't injure their foundations, such as overexerting their mana or life force, all they had to do was cast a few rays of holy light on themselves. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to receive too much holy light healing in order to avoid overexerting their lifespan. This was basically meaningless for semi-gods, especially semi-gods who wielded the power of holy light. This was also the foundational reason why high-level holy knights were so disgusting to demons. Holy knights had thick skin and flesh, and any contact with them would even injure chaos creatures. They would even self-destruct at the slightest provocation if they were forced into a corner. Not only that, these holy knights had incredibly strong life force. As long as their heads didn't fall off, it would be very difficult for them to completely die. Anyone who encountered a holy knight would feel like a cockroach that wouldn't die. Also, since I wasn't seriously injured, how could Sophocles, who was far more powerful than I was, possibly return to the chaos abyss with such heavy injuries? Sophocles was currently acting in such a manner in order to disappear from the gods and Cavendish's sight. What a pity. I felt quite regretful. If I had an additional magic sword, perhaps I would have been able to defeat Sophocles. For example, if my ice magic sword had been fully formed, I would have been able to restrict Sophocles from fighting on the battlefield and bathe him in holy light along with the snow calamity. After Sophocles was continuously weakened, he would then be cleansed by the holy light for several hours or even several days before I focused my power on killing him. If my 7 deadly sins had been fully formed, a single backstab attack would likely have been able to seriously injure Sophocles' soul. Of course, if my inference was correct, my 7 deadly sins wouldn't be very effective against demons and undead. Now that I had leaked information about Sophocles, it would be quite impossible for me to ambush him again. But when I thought about it, I was fortunate that my other magic swords hadn't been fully formed yet, so I couldn't leak any more information. Most of what I had leaked was that I possessed a powerful myth-ranked weapon of holy light. My weapon's 2 abilities of spreading holy light and condensing holy light into a sword were likely to be known by others. If that was all there was to it, it would have been somewhat acceptable. It would seem that I'm still quite far off. The fact that I was able to fight against Sophocles to such a degree didn't mean that my power level was truly on par with the Chaos main gods. It was that I had chosen to naturally counter demons' powers from the very start. Holy Light's natural counter to demons and undead went without saying. It would deal at least 10 times the damage to demons and undead. This didn't mean that my power level was only 10% of Sophocles. There were many things that couldn't be calculated. For example, Lone 2 had killed so many dragons that rivers of blood flowed, becoming a demon legend among dragons. Even supreme immemorial dragons would avoid Lone 2 when they saw him. This didn't mean that Lone 2's power level was enough to overwhelm Dragon City. He had simply chosen to counter Dragon Slayer's abilities. If he met a high-level demon, his performance would likely be even worse than an ordinary semi-god's. Killing power was only one part of Lone 2's counter abilities. Not only that, it was the least effective part. Increasing hit rate against dragons, reducing the damage from dragon spit attacks, immunity to draconic might, additional dragon scale penetration effects on my weapon, anti-poison effects on dragons, making it impossible for dragons to heal their wounds, the ability to fly, and seeing through weaknesses. All of these disgusting effects were far more effective than simply increasing Lone 2's attack power. After all, attacks that didn't hit would mean nothing. Attacks that didn't break through Lone 2's defense would mean nothing. Naturally, Lone 2 wouldn't receive any damage if he didn't live long enough. All of these abilities would instantly make Lone 2 the natural enemy of dragons. Every single one of his attacks would hit a vital point. He would ignore Lone 2's spit attacks and claw attacks. As long as his opponent bled, they would die. Even dragons that were far more powerful than Lone 2 would be instantly killed by Lone 2. My Dawn Holy Light Sword was also a specialized weapon against large demons and undead. My domain of pure holy light would continuously weaken my opponent, while my Sword of Light would continuously accumulate the power of order, becoming stronger and more difficult to defend against. In the end, my opponent, who was tortured to the extreme by being roasted, would have to face my fatal demon-slaying sword. Theoretically speaking, as long as I could maintain this attack for a long enough time, it should be able to kill any undead or demon. However, this actual combat had exposed the inadequacies of my newly born magic sword. My opponent isn't an idiot. He won't just obediently watch as you accumulate power while he's constantly being weakened. Sophocles had plenty of combat experience. He instantly understood the situation and unhesitatingly fought against my ultimate attack, not giving me any chance to accumulate power at all. If Sophocles had chosen to escape from my domain of holy light from the very beginning, I wouldn't have been able to stop him at all. At this moment, I really felt that there was a flaw in my ability. It would seem that I need to think of a way to quickly create a second magic sword to restrict Sophocles' movements. Otherwise, if I meet an opponent at this level again, I'll really... What are you doing, silly cat? I spat out the feather pillow in my mouth as I angrily looked at the silly cat who was pretending to be innocent. Did she really think that I was a jinx? Was I really that clever? Did she think that a main god would appear just because I said so? Did she think that main gods were like cabbages that could be found anywhere? However, the ship's alarm suddenly started ringing, causing me to swallow my words. Chapter 739. The floating passenger ship Forward was manufactured in the Ottoman Suro shipyard. It was a 107-meter-long luxury passenger ship named Fortune. The ship had 2 third-class cabins, large public cabins, 90 second-class cabins, 3-person rooms, 50 first-class cabins, 2-person rooms / 3-person rooms, and 20 VIP rooms, 10 2-person rooms, and 10 single-person rooms. The ship had a theoretical capacity of 500 passengers, with an average capacity of 340 passengers. Unlike future large-scale passenger ships that had their own game rooms, dance halls, and swimming pools, the first generation of floating airships didn't have mature passenger technology. Most of the ship's cabins were just engine rooms and energy pools that were constantly operating. Even if there was extra space, considering the current harsh environment, some magic crystal cannons and aerial night would be installed. Although it had been 3.5 years since the airship was first constructed, and it had already made nearly 100 round-trip flights, the crew's attentive maintenance and powerful financial support made it look just like a new airship. Captain Knott had always been proud of being the pilot of this airship. He even privately referred to this airship as his most beloved daughter. But now, perhaps even his daughter's father wouldn't recognize this airship. The smooth, dark yellow deck was now covered in cracks. One of the airship's 4 engines had completely stopped working while emitting black smoke, while the other engine would stop and turn. The result was that the airship would frequently tilt, scaring the pilot to the point where he didn't dare to relax. After half of the airship's sails were burned away, they were directly abandoned. However, the empty flagpole wasn't alone, because it had already been broken. Even the uppermost VIP cabins had been completely destroyed. Fortunately, when the shockwaves arrived, everyone had taken refuge in the large cabins, which was why no accidents had happened to the important guests. Right now, only the royalty, major nobles, and major merchants of the various countries could afford the suckers' VIP airship tickets. If several dozen of them died at once, perhaps even the ship's owner wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. The VIPs were quite reasonable. It was just that the vice captain, crew head, chief officer, and other high-ranking crew members' cabins had all been given up to the VIPs who were still in shock. The captain's cabin, which had the most luxurious decorations and the most complete facilities, it had already been taken up by the guest, who had hidden his identity and boarded the airship. Captain not had 20 years of experience as a smuggler. However, during the war against the Sea Tribe, he voluntarily joined the Ottoman Navy and piloted an armed cargo ship to attack the Sea Tribe supply lines. He fought here and there for 3.5 years. Although his combat results weren't astonishing, he was still a qualified soldier. After Lady Storm died, the entire Ottoman Empire's Ottoman capital became clear. Not also chose to retire. Later, the Ottoman government considered his past and recommended him to be the pilot airship's captain. At the very least, he had done quite well in the past few years. As a former Ottoman soldier, how could he not know about Roland? Without reinforcements from the Mist Alliance, the Ottoman capital would likely still be in a state of chaos. Roland's name was directly connected to Lady Storm's death. His disciples and subordinates had also participated in the battle to reclaim the entire capital. During that difficult battle, the Grey Elf Anti-Knight Squadron was a powerful combat unit that rivaled an airship squadron. The addition of all sorts of new combat equipment solidified the Ottoman Empire's desire to ally with the Mist Alliance. Not only was the Ottoman Empire realistic, it was also how countries interacted with each other. Weak countries wouldn't have diplomatic relations, while strong countries wouldn't do anything and would have people follow them. This was nothing new at all. That was why the captain unhesitatingly protected Roland the moment he recognized him. That's right, he protected Roland. Roland's entire body had been burned to such an extent. Logically speaking, it seemed that Roland could die at any moment. It would be strange if anyone with ulterior motives didn't want to take action against such a good opportunity. This wasn't an unfounded worry. This airship had sailed from San Antonio's territory, and in San Antonio, Roland was the most wanted criminal for murdering Empress Maria. If there really was a San Antonio patriot on this airship who was willing to pay any price to take revenge for Empress Maria, then this would be the best opportunity. Unfortunately, the passengers witnessed Roland falling onto the deck. Naturally, the news of him being heavily injured was leaked, and it was too late for Knot to block this information, even if he wanted to. In the end, Knot could only make some preparations in case of a rainy day. Knot's guess was correct. Rakage, who had been requested to guard the airship, managed to capture 2 hot-blooded youths with poison daggers that very night. But soon, Knot discovered that he had been overthinking things. In just a few hours, Prince Roland regained consciousness at a speed visible to the naked eye. He then complained about how he was bored with recuperating and wanted to have some fun to pass the time. Knot could only helplessly send out his first mate and several powerful guards to play cards with Roland to pass the time. In less than 2 hours, all of them were released. The reason? This injured Roland, the strongest holy knight, had actually won everyone's money in just half an hour. His miraculous gambling skills and his cheating skills made people wonder if he really was a holy knight who believed in abstinence and strict self-discipline. In the end, Roland said something, and Captain Knot no longer acted as a protector. There's no need to protect me. Even if I'm injured, anyone that can threaten me can ignore you all. Although this was rather discouraging, Knot actually heaved a sigh of relief. After all, if Roland died on the airship due to his own responsibility, nobody would be able to take responsibility for that. Fortunately, the second half of that night was rather peaceful. As dawn arrived on the second day, Holy Knight Roland's external injuries had all disappeared without a trace. In fact, he even started gambling with ordinary customers in the restaurant. Knot had heard that powerful individuals all had many strange fetishes. For example, a certain powerful individual from the Mist Alliance married multiple princesses and started a harem, even though she was a female. A certain emperor from another country would talk to a stone statue whenever he felt too stressed. It was even said that Not's own empress was tired of dressing up as a man, while the emperor had a fetish for dressing up as a woman, of course. These were all rumors that had no truth to them. Not would usually just laugh at such rumors and not take them seriously. Sometimes, during long journeys, male sailors would be just as gossipy as the sailors. They loved to gossip about the powerful individuals. After all, the best way to improve the friendship of colleagues was probably to badmouth their superiors together. But now, it would seem that such ridiculous rumors weren't completely baseless. At the very least, this prince from the Northlands was just as the rumors said. He definitely wasn't a proper, orthodox holy knight. Rumors said that he was extremely knowledgeable, but he never used his knowledge on the proper path. More than 30% of the gambling industry and pornographic magazines in the Northlands were under his control. His legendary super mercenary group, the Absolute Gentleman Alliance, was his tool for controlling the entire Northlands. Arms trading, mercenary trading, elven and beastman human trafficking. These were all things that ordinary people wouldn't even dare to imagine, yet he controlled them all. He was the throne in the shadows, the uncrowned king, the man who couldn't be offended in the Northlands, the last mist knight of the Northlands, and the ruler of the underground. He had a series of unofficial legendary titles. There was a saying that in the Northlands, you could offend any ruler of the Misalliance, but you definitely couldn't say a single bad word about Roland. Otherwise, no matter where you came from, you wouldn't be able to return alive. I really couldn't tell that he was such an amazing person. He's a holy knight who knows how to gamble in the underworld, and he's obviously cheating. It's unimaginable, and yet, nobody has ever questioned his character. However, compared to the legendary titles of the Holy Knight and the strongest villain, His Highness Roland seemed to be much easier to deal with. No matter if it was the former captain of an Ottoman warship or a smuggler who traveled all over the world, Not could be said to have seen many things. In his line of work, the most important thing was to be able to recognize people. Not had met countless people, but he had never met someone like Roland before. It wasn't that he hadn't met semi-god or myth-ranked individuals before. In his eyes, no matter which faction, all undying individuals had the same characteristic. They didn't treat ordinary people as humans. He would occasionally meet some undying individuals who cared about their reputation and would say nice things, but would always maintain a certain distance from ordinary people. It would be quite simple. When eating, food would be delivered to Roland's room. When bathing, he would want to have his own time and space. He would casually make a request, or even something as simple as adding spices to his food, which would cause his subordinates to run errands for him. And he would even think that it was only natural. It would be even worse if he had a noble status or an outstanding bloodline. He would be giving you face just by glancing at you. No matter how nice he said things, if you gave him coarse black bread for lunch, he would instantly turn hostile. Someone like Roland, who was clearly a top-level beyonder, was actually fighting with ordinary people. No, he truly viewed himself as an ordinary person. He ate black bread, drank sour ale, gambled with drunkards, and even reneged on his debt if he lost. He was enjoying such a life, and he even pretended to be drunk to scam drunkards out of their money. Not had never seen a level 4 individual like Roland before. At the very least, he seems much more comfortable than those beyonders. A cold wind blew past. A new dawn was slowly rising from the east. The night wind was the most hurtful in the period before the sun rose. Not carefully pulled up the collar of his coat to make himself more comfortable. Not relaxed a lot of his worries. All of this was just hearsay, and it didn't have much to do with him. No matter how he felt about Roland, it wouldn't affect his mission. All he needed to do was carry out his duty as a former soldier and escort his most important guest to his destination. After passing through this snowy mountain range, he would be able to see the outskirts of the Bardi Empire. With Bardi's Dragon Knight squadron patrolling the area, he wouldn't have to worry about his safety. Suddenly, Not noticed that a familiar figure had appeared on the deck of his ship. "Your Highness Roland? Why are you up so early? Your injuries haven't healed yet, and you need to rest more. Don't tell me that you're staying in the cabin." This person only glanced at Not, causing him to be unable to finish the rest of his sentence. This person had a similar appearance, and was also smiling. However, the emotions contained within were completely different. Roland's smile was to express his kindness and happiness. He was communicating his emotions to others. Although this person was also smiling, he was enjoying his own happiness from the bottom of his heart. There was no one else in his eyes at all. Everything he said was an order that would definitely be carried out. "Oh, I heard that my older brother was here, so I came to greet him. Lead the way." Chapter 740. Once upon a time, there were two brothers. They were the fortunate ones. The moment they were born into this world, they received the sincerest blessings and heartfelt joy from the entire country and millions of citizens. The old emperor has a son. The Mist Kingdom's new heir has been born. Although life in that land of ice and snow was difficult, under the wise old emperor's leadership, everyone believed that the future would only get better and better. The old emperor was already middle-aged. Due to an injury he had received when he was young, his health was rapidly deteriorating. The problem of an heir had always troubled this country. Now that two princes had appeared at once, perhaps this blessed Northland's country would become even more stable. From that day onward, the birth of the twin stars became a new day of celebration for the entire country, Gemini Day. Gods bless them. I hope that they can quickly grow up and support this country. I hope that the Mist royalty will have wise rulers every generation. Perhaps that prayer, without an address, was effective, or perhaps there really was a pair of eyes watching them from the heavens. Not only did the twins grow up rapidly, they even displayed their innate extraordinariness. Gods bless the Mist. Not only are our princes outstanding, they're also geniuses. The first prince displayed an abnormally mature mentality despite his young age. His strange inventions brought much fun to the icy and snowy Defender. His outstanding achievements in politics and literature also caused his reputation for being a precocious child to spread throughout Defender. Every time someone heard him read out a government announcement with a childlike voice, there would always be people who would say, "The eldest prince will be a wise ruler." As for the youngest prince, he was a true genius in swordsmanship and magic. He could instantly learn any martial arts technique, understand any magic spell, and improve at an inconceivable speed. Every time they saw him easily leave his peers behind and easily defeat his mentor, someone would say, "You're really good at martial arts." The youngest prince will be an outstanding general. As the two princes' reputation as geniuses spread, the citizens became more and more expectant of their futures. Only the eldest prince knew that the two princes were different. Cavendish is the true genius. I'm just a transmigrator who was born with knowledge. So-called wisdom is just another accumulation of experience. If I don't work hard, I'll be left behind sooner or later. Roland knew better than anyone that he was just a mortal, especially when there was such a true genius in front of him. So-called geniuses just have a slightly higher starting point and a slightly better way of learning. As a result, their efficiency is slightly higher than that of ordinary people. Coupled with sufficient interest and concentration, a highly efficient learning method, coupled with the accumulation of time, will naturally allow them to easily leave their peers behind. In the eyes of ordinary people, they are probably geniuses. On the other hand, his younger brother, who was only a few minutes younger than him, had easily shattered his inherent concept of a genius. This wasn't some highly efficient method of understanding or learning, but rather an instinct that allowed one to learn with just a glance. This wasn't the accumulation of time and sweat. Just a casual swing of the sword would allow him to unleash sword energy. He had been practicing for 3 days and becoming a sword saint in less than 3 days. His naturally sensitive combat instincts allowed him to defeat an old general who had experienced hundreds of battles in a chess game. Martial arts, military affairs, and magic were all things that he could understand with a single glance. He could learn how to compose music by listening to someone's humming. He could deduce a language dictionary by looking at hieroglyphs. Even though he wasn't good at politics, he was still quite skilled at it thanks to his wild instincts and outstanding relationships. It's quite simple. Why are you all so serious? Brother, you're so stupid. You don't even understand this? Hurry up and finish your homework so we can go play. His childish words revealed the difference between truth and cruelty. Perhaps there were truly some people who were superior to ordinary people from birth. Perhaps, to some people, the hard work of others for more than 10 years was just a result that they could achieve casually. Perhaps, with the existence of a genius, ordinary people should know their limits and obediently give up. Tui, I'm your older brother. How could I possibly be inferior to you? However, Roland was someone who didn't know what it meant to give up. That's right, even if I couldn't become a sword saint in 3 days, I could at least spend 3 years. After all, it would still be frightening if I said it out loud. That's right, I couldn't learn everything immediately. But at the very least, I had the accumulated knowledge of 2 different worlds, as well as the wisdom of an adult. As long as I was willing to put in the effort, what couldn't I learn? My precocious older brother didn't give up. Instead, he became even more resolute and shameless through constant setbacks. All right, I couldn't smile as brightly and innocently as you, but I could at least imitate a similar smile and express my kindness. All right, I wasn't like you who could learn everything immediately and be proficient in everything. But at the very least, I was able to focus my limited attention on what I was best at in the most important areas, using the most efficient method to improve myself. The results weren't bad at all. Failed? Just try again. Lost? Just try again. Tired? Just take a nap and try again. My mortal older brother didn't want to admit defeat and wanted to maintain his dignity as an older brother in front of his genius younger brother. While his heart was filled with scars, he unknowingly reached the limits of an ordinary person and became a so-called artificial genius. Tisk, isn't the result the same? Is there any substantial difference between reaching the goal easily and reaching the goal with great difficulty? Back in the day, Roland didn't know that not only was there a difference, there was a huge difference. The 2 brothers were blessed. They had far too many people who loved them. The 2 brothers were unfortunate. There were far too many shadows watching them from behind. In the end, the 2 brothers lost everything. But at that moment, their different personalities and lives diverged for the first time. The 2 of them had fundamentally different understandings of their own misfortune. And this difference in understanding directly led to the divergence in their lives. It's all because I wasn't strong enough that all of this happened. If only I had worked harder earlier. No, if only I'd been 10 times stronger than I am now. Those bastards wouldn't have been able to harm us. The genius younger brother fell into self-blame. He regretted wasting his talent and time in the past. He regretted why he wasn't strong enough. After he borrowed power from the Chaos Abyss for revenge, he also stepped into the Chaos Abyss. That was because only the Chaos Abyss, which represented evolution and chaos, could satisfy his desire for power. Being weak is a sin. The final sentence he said before stepping into the Chaos Abyss was his final obsession as he abandoned his past and pursued power. The mortal's elder brother had also sunk into self-blame. However, his sense of self-blame was somewhat different. I shouldn't have trusted the Holy Church. I already understood the true nature of the God of Holy Light, yet I still trusted those bishops. I was foolish. I should have long since seen through the wild ambitions of the surrounding countries. No, I should have spared no expense in establishing a few loyal allies and playing a game of diplomatic balance. There were also problems with the food supply routes back in the day. The Northlands were far too lacking in food. I should have established a few more stable food merchants. The new gunpowder wasn't installed yet. It should have been too early to improve weapons and equipment. Regarding the same misfortune, the genius younger brother could only think of one reason, while the mortal elder brother could think of hundreds of shortcomings. Then, just like in the past, he recorded every mistake and uneasiness in his diary, reminding himself to be careful not to repeat the same mistakes in the future. Then, he made up for the shortcomings bit by bit. After that, the 2 of them only faintly heard news about each other, but they never met again. Just from the rumors, they knew that the 2 brothers were no longer the same type of people. Since seeing each other again would only bring pain, it was better not to see each other again. However, the 2 of them had a faint mutual understanding. Roland's younger brother destroyed anyone he met in the chaos abyss. When his astonishing talent combined with his cheat-like luck, he grew up and broke countless records in history. He reached the peak in just 300 years and could be called the son of the dimension, the king of dragons. He obtained the power that he desired. He obtained everything that he wanted. As for the older brother, if he failed once, he would try again. If he failed twice, he would try again. If he failed a third time, he would lick his wounds and try again. Eventually, there were hundreds, even thousands of entries in his diary that recorded his experiences and weaknesses. They even filled up an entire library. His elder brother, who was once a mortal, had become a true monster. That was a monster whose name alone was enough to make the world tremble in fear. He wasn't just a single person. He was a team under common banner. He wasn't just a slogan. He had his own ideals and methods. He was using laws and contracts to change the entire world, using a new holy light to purify the world. Pure power was the part of him that he wasn't afraid of. His intelligence and slyness were viewed as the scariest evil. He no longer blindly worked alone. He desired to understand and be understood. In the end, he stood together with his companions. Meanwhile, his younger brother stood alone at the peak of the world, looking at him. Oh, we meet again. That's right, they met again. Unknowingly, the two brothers were now on the same level again. It seemed that neither of them would be able to avoid the other this time. When the two brothers reached the peak of the world and looked back, they discovered that their worldviews and paths were so different. In fact, they were diametrically opposed. A single person's power is limited. This world is worth saving, but it shouldn't be saved by me alone. I want the world to become a better place. All I need to do is plant seeds and find companions. His older brother learned how to understand others, learned how to borrow their power, and learned how to use ideals and rules to change the world. Misfortune will befall those who aren't strong enough. Being weak is a sin. This world of the weak is far too boring, far too boring. That's why misfortune exists. His younger brother's thoughts were exactly the same as before. However, the strongest power in this world was also enough to topple the entire world. Unfortunately, no, this should be an inevitability. Their personalities and pasts had determined that they would definitely have some differences in their understanding of the world. Roland, don't you feel that this entire world is so boring? This entire sealed world is just a boring arena. Today, you kill me, and tomorrow, I kill you. There's no fundamental change. It's just like two insects fighting to the death, but they don't realize that the adults beside them are just watching them like it's a joke. I'm going to open up the barrier. I'm going to jump out of this boring box. I'm going to allow this stagnant world to begin evolving once again. I'm going to solve this boring holy war from the very foundation. Closing the door because you're afraid of a challenge? You're afraid of true evolution, but you're fighting in the so-called HE civil war because you want power? Don't you think that's foolish? Roland smiled. However, his smile seemed forced and tragic. He could already see what would happen next. However, there were some things that he couldn't allow to happen. Brat, what you say makes a lot of sense. I admit that the two creator goddesses of order and chaos are foolish enough to do such a foolish thing, but I refuse to agree. Evolution? That's right. I admit that no matter how harsh the environment outside is, some existences and species will survive and complete evolution. Perhaps in the end, the HE dimension will become even more powerful than it is now. Let's see what will happen to those mortals. It's likely that they'll barely survive in the holy war and won't be able to evolve at all. They'll probably be the first to be eliminated. Mortals deserve to be eliminated. The weak are born to be food for the strong to evolve. I'm sorry, but I refuse. Your older brother is an ordinary person. Your father is an ordinary person. Your mother is an ordinary person. Your entire family is an ordinary person. Cavendish, you little bastard who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today, your older brother shall give you one final lesson. Don't look down on mortals. Chapter 741. Cavendish had arrived quite suddenly, and left even more suddenly. I was about to attack when he unhesitatingly left, leaving behind a single sentence. Not now. Although I knew that this would be the end result of our conversation, I still felt quite unwilling to leave some things unsaid. Perhaps this was why Cavendish had appeared in front of me, even though he had already predicted my decision. I would feel unwilling if I didn't try. I sighed and felt rather sad, but there was no possibility of regret. I could understand Cavendish's reasoning. That was because, in a way, countless misfortunes had originated from this sealed world. The goddesses of chaos and chaos were afraid of powerful invaders from other dimensions. They desired for themselves and the species they created to become stronger. However, they disagreed on what it meant to be strong, which finally resulted in a holy war. Theoretically speaking, a holy war would be impossible to have an end. That was because neither chaos nor order would be able to completely destroy the other. Even if one side was completely destroyed, a new order or chaos would appear as time passed. From a certain standpoint, sacrifices weren't completely worthless. Although the path was quite complicated, the overall power level of the entire mortal plane was constantly improving. Although ancient species, and ancient gods sounded quite cool, their methods of using power were rather primitive and crude. Their weapons and equipment were also quite primitive. Their concepts were all rather old-fashioned and shallow. Of course, the ancient ones who were able to keep up with the times were powerful. However, even more ancient species had been unknowingly left behind by the times, becoming ancient artifacts that only the tears of the times. There were plenty of these ancient species in the Chaos Abyss. Although they were famous, they might not necessarily be able to defeat a brat who was only several hundred years old in a real fight. In the past, angels, giants, and dragons had all relied on their outstanding physical strength to fight. Even wood and rocks could be used as weapons. Now, not only were they armed to the teeth with high-level equipment, their magic and martial arts techniques have been passed down for countless generations. They had countless curses and ultimate techniques. The ancient species' direct attack methods were as childish and laughable as hoodlums' punches. It wasn't that the ancient dragons from the god and demon era were so powerful that they were undefeatable. It was that the powerful dragons of the past were able to survive for so long that they were called ancient dragons. Naturally, they would have been polished to an unimaginable degree by the passage of time. Ancient god equipment? Let's see if it's rusted first. Powerful ancient species? How's your old waist? Can you still jump? Cough, I was getting off topic. Although there were always people who liked to talk about how everything was fine in the past, in my opinion, the entire generation was still progressing. The four major elemental magic from the Elven Empire's era had already been developed to the point where there were hundreds or even thousands of branches. Even if a legendary and incomparably powerful archmage were to be thrown into the current generation, he would probably have to study for 30 years first. Time will always progress. This was something that I had always firmly believed in, although inheritance sounded rather abstract. As long as words and history existed, the entire world would naturally move forward. Blindly worshipping the world would be unnecessary and even more foolish. However, not to mention the mortal races, even the two goddesses themselves didn't know if this progress was enough. It was like a cage. No matter how the beasts inside fought, they wouldn't know if they could defeat the beasts outside. This analogy seemed a little inappropriate. Then, it was like the examinees before the college entrance examination. They wouldn't know if they had prepared enough until the day of the exam. Once this cage was opened, there would naturally be no need for this periodic war to exist. But I knew that Cavendish didn't wish for the war to stop. What he longed for was the opportunity to evolve, to reactivate the time needle of this world that had fallen to a standstill. An indefinite war between races? Are you kidding me? Maintaining the balance of the cycle of reincarnation? What does that have to do with me? Is it really that interesting to keep going around in circles? As long as I opened the door to this world, the entire world of Aichi would naturally welcome a baptism from the outside world. At that time, it would be nothing more than survival of the fittest. Those who survived would be the strong, while those who died would be the unlucky and weak. I could understand that it was better to get the pain over with than the pain over with. Secluding the entire world was quite foolish to begin with. However, understanding definitely didn't mean that I agreed. In history, secluding the entire world had always paid a heavy price. When the world's door was finally opened, the invaders would bring new things that you had never seen before and easily slap you in the face. If you fall behind, you'll get beaten up. This wasn't just an empty saying. This was an experience filled with blood and tears. However, there's a foundational difference between the seclusion of HE and the human countries. What if the people outside aren't humans, but rather a group of vicious, man-eating demons? What if their goal isn't to enslave and conquer us, but rather to completely exterminate us? Indeed, nobody knew just what was out there that the two goddesses of order and chaos had been afraid of for so many years. Not to mention, the game's history had faithfully portrayed the dimensional invaders from back in the day. This made the situation quite grim. In the game's history, both goddesses of order and chaos had been revived, but it was still meaningless. Taking a step back, even if Ike was able to survive the baptism of foreign creatures and achieve so-called evolution, just how many of them would be able to survive? 10%? 5%? It was impossible for me to estimate. If the dimensional invaders were as powerful as the game's history had described, then I would be quite happy if even 10% survived. Perhaps some people would say, this is a necessary sacrifice. This is the cannon fodder of history. There will always be people who can't keep up with the times. However, I would say that those would be the sacrifices, not your sarcastic remarks. Who should be eliminated? Who should be sacrificed? Who finally managed to survive in this world, only to die because of someone else's words? Would anyone be able to make such a heavy decision? Taking a step back, if the dimensional invaders really suffered more than 90% casualties, who would be confident in surviving? In that case, even if the dimensional invaders managed to achieve so-called evolution, what meaning would there be? Perhaps there really would be a powerful HE country in the end, where all species could coexist peacefully, where the power of magic would be able to change everyone's lives, and where civilization and art would become what everyone wanted. But would there be any meaning to that? In this generation, would the dead people who were sacrificed be happy? It was so difficult for me to finally see the light at the end of everything. How could I possibly allow all of this to happen? Was I wrong for making such a decision? I was wrong for stopping the development of history. Perhaps in a few hundred or even a few thousand years, a new species would bring about a new holy war. Was Cavendish wrong for being so willful? Yes, he was wrong. He basically didn't care about the lives of other mortals at all. Countless people would die because of him. Was I right for making such a decision? Of course I was right. The entire mortal plane had finally developed to such a degree. How could I possibly take such a huge risk and use countless lives in exchange for so-called evolution and progress? Was Cavendish correct for being so willful? Of course he was correct. He was correct to the point of being irrefutable. The two goddesses of order and chaos were the idiots. I was a coward who didn't dare to advance when I saw the possibility of sacrifice. Only by opening up that dimensional door would HE's stagnant time be able to advance again. Only then would HE's Holy War's cycle of destruction and reconstruction be repeated. At this point, there was no longer any such thing as right or wrong. Perhaps this was the inevitable result of having different standpoints and values. I knew that next time, no matter if I met Cavendish or if Cavendish met me, not right now. So, it's going to be next time? Next time we meet, we won't hold back at all. In the end, we'll still have to kill each other. Chapter 742. The Bardi capital was an ancient city with a long history. If one looked down from the sky, the city was several times larger than it had been 8 or 9 years ago. No, more accurately speaking, several new functional areas have been added to the city, as well as several new satellite cities. The most eye-catching part of the city was the vast area to the north. Originally, there had been a mountain range there. The cliffs around it had been hollowed out, and gigantic palaces had been erected there. Dragons could often be seen flying in and out of the palaces. This was the Bardi Dragon City, which had only been in operation for several years. Beneath the Dragon City was a new arena made of white bricks. Night duels would be held here to improve their martial arts techniques, as well as to show off their strength to the dragons. Thanks to the combined efforts of the Bardi Emperor and various powerful dragons, as well as external pressure, the dragons gradually gave up on their former arrogance. It was no longer that difficult to accept fighting alongside a knight. But now, it was no longer necessary for a high-level knight and a high-level dragon to work together in order to be invincible. With the introduction of a tremendous amount of new equipment, many young dragons would choose to work with a knight that came along with their new equipment. Why did this sound so strange? But it was the truth. Many dragons viewed knight as nothing more than players who came along with their equipment. 3 years ago, the new venomous scorpion, 2 magical cannons, and medium energy cannons had been successfully introduced. Dragons with multiple heavy magical cannons were becoming more and more like the new rulers of the skies. These dragons now had a new name, and it was even possible that they could be converted into a regular soldier type. Magical armored battle dragons. The new city to the west of the city was a new district for technicians, engineers, and mages. Even though Bardi was a mega empire with a tradition of dragon knight magic, it unhesitatingly started developing magical engineering technology after discovering the importance of it. A tremendous amount of resources, wealth, population, and, most importantly, a sufficient number of educated people brought about a pool of talented magical instructors. This allowed Dragon Knight Emperor Helent to swiftly catch up to the older generation. Under Dragon Knight Emperor Helent's leadership, Dragon Knight Empire seemed to be on the rise. In fact, it was very easy to understand. Spend money to buy technology and talent from the Allies, then throw out a government decree for scholars to change professions and invest in promising researchers. Even if they couldn't immediately produce results, they could make the researchers yearn for such a research environment and take the initiative to come. Then, let the emerging talents consider the benefits and choose this profession. After 10 or 20 years, they would be waiting to reap the results. However, unlike the Ottoman Empire, which was also a new country of magic engineering, the Ottoman Empire had enough dragons as war resources. They didn't invest their energy and funds into the construction of heavy ships and tanks. Instead, they focused on the development of all kinds of small and heavy combat equipment. Actual combat was the only reason they chose their research field. Magic engine, miniature, medium, energy battery, practical artillery, /heavy crossbow, magic armor. These were all important technologies that other countries viewed as minor details, but they were now being researched as key areas. Just now, I mentioned the Magic Armor Battle Dragon. The Magic Armor Battle Dragon was equipped with a heavy/medium energy pool as its second mana reserve. It was also equipped with hundreds of pieces of magic armor and 4 to 20 new cannons. It was armed to the teeth. It would be easy for it to take on 5 people of the same rank. Several months ago, the Magic Armored Battle Dragon suddenly made an appearance in the battle against the undead army. The Magic Armored Battle Dragon achieved astonishing results and attracted countless people's attention. Only then did the world discover that the Bardi Empire, which had originally been thought to be slow and inflexible, had actually progressed incredibly far in the field of magic engineering. Magic Armored Battle Dragons were mentioned in Emperor Bardi's New Year's speech that they could now mass-produce regular troops. Currently, the entire Bardi Empire had 312 Magic Armored Battle Dragons. Magic Armored Battle Dragons' defensive power, endurance, and attack power had all been greatly improved thanks to magic engineering technology. Magic Armor Battle Dragons made ordinary Lich's magical attacks ineffective. Their powerful physical bodies and overwhelming cannon attacks allowed the Magic Armored Battle Dragons to slaughter as they pleased on the Calamity battlefield. Actual combat proved just how powerful and terrifying this combination was. According to the Fairy's evaluation, the Magic Armor Battle Dragons was at the Legend rank. That was to say, this was a frightening army with an average combat power of at least Legend rank. On paper, the Magic Armor Battle Dragons were already the strongest army in the entire world. Of course, this wasn't without its disadvantages. Not only would they consume a tremendous amount of resources and gold coins, it was said that Emperor Hellent was so poor that he was even selling off all of his personal belongings for the sake of these precious magic armored battle dragons. Also, the magic armor battle dragons were mostly young and middle-aged dragons. The ancient dragons and immemorial dragons' true trump cards were still their own bodies. Magic engineering technology wouldn't be of much help in terms of high-level combat strength. Also, since the magic armored battle dragons had far too much heavy equipment on them, even with the assistance of floating engines, the magic armored battle dragon's agility wasn't something worth looking forward to. If the floating engines were turned off, or if the floating engines malfunctioned, the magic armored battle dragons would probably fall from the sky. That won't happen. It's written in our operating manual. In such a situation, all we have to do is directly disintegrate and drop all our equipment. Emperor Hellent said that if we lose our equipment, we can always make more. If we lose our dragons and humans, they'll be gone forever. The moment I entered Barty's airspace, two of the most advanced magic armored battle dragons followed me. They even brought along a diplomatic representative. It was evident that they had received news of my arrival long ago. This middle-aged Barty diplomat was named Steel Zhou. He had been to the Mist Kingdom before and had met me before. Hellent was quite considerate to send Steel here to receive me. The Barty Empire's method of discarding their equipment and prioritizing their personnel over others was doubtlessly proof of how wealthy the Barty Empire was. The Mist Alliance will be able to construct 2 destroyers with the cost of a single set of dragon armor. Perhaps this was the difference in power between a major country and a small country. Using the same technology in a small country, the small country would only be able to earn a slight advantage for a short period of time. In fact, the small country wouldn't even be able to afford the advanced technology and wouldn't be able to produce a finished product. Meanwhile, the major countries would only think about selling their old products and leftover materials after they finish producing their own products. The forward passenger airship's engine hadn't been repaired yet, so we didn't have the ability to soar through the clouds. The airship was flying at a high enough altitude that we could clearly see the ground below us. There were 2 dragons on each side of the airship, as well as 2 dragon knights on top of them. These 2 dragons would occasionally glance at us curiously. It seems that these dragon knights aren't dragon descendants? I casually asked, but Steel broke out into a cold sweat. From a certain standpoint, this was probably the same as spying on the military. He was hesitating as he didn't know if he could answer. However, there was someone else who could easily make a decision. Yep, now that the Holy War has reached this point, those ancient existences have all understood the situation. Before considering the dragon's pride, it's more important to think of ways to protect the continuity and status of the Barty Empire. Following the deep voice was a middle-aged man wearing a heavy blue cloak, heavy armor, and a crown on his head. He walked over and gave me an overly enthusiastic hug. Everyone around him knelt down. Long time no see, Your Highness Roland. Welcome back to Barty. I hope that you've brought me good news this time. Hellent Milan, the former Archduke of the Dragon Knights, was now the current Emperor of the Dragon Knights. Compared to 9 years ago, he had grown slightly taller. He had intentionally grown a beard and makeup to make him appear more mature. However, from what I could see, his physical body seemed even younger than before. Frightening power was contained within this physical body. I closed my eyes, and all I could sense was a powerful dragon. It would seem that the current Hellent was more like a dragon than a human. This was to be expected. After all, many of the dragon's secret techniques would increase the purity of their bloodline. Hellent had no reason to refuse this power. Compared to the shy youth of the past, the current Hellent had rather exaggerated expressions. Oh no, you've already brought me good news. 1 week ago, you, as a human, defeated a chaos main god and achieved eternal glory. Come, let us celebrate this great victory for the heroes of humanity. After Hellent finished talking to himself, Barty's emperor excitedly started applauding. Naturally, the surrounding servants and commoners also applauded. For a while, thunderous applause and cheers filled the air. I was almost overwhelmed by the drummers. Those who were unaccountably solicitous were hiding evil intentions. Halen's sudden excessive enthusiasm only gave me a strange feeling and gave me goosebumps. Propaganda, propaganda. Helen whispered to me in a low voice. He then took my hand and waved at the commoners below us. Only now did I notice that the forward had already entered the harbor, and that the welcoming crowd had completely filled the area below us. I could even faintly make out that there were more people than there were in front of us. Not far away, there were even small dragons carrying red banners. A warm celebration for the 8th anniversary of the Mist Alliance's friendship with the Bardi Empire. A warm welcome to the Mist Alliance's leader, His Highness Roland, who has come to guide us. A warm celebration for His Highness Roland's return from slaying demons. The welcoming crowd, flowers, cannon salutes, and military bands were all here. The only thing that didn't seem right was that the forward seemed like it was about to break down. However, with 4 magical battle dragons escorting it, it seemed even more domineering and calm, as if it was a warrior returning from the battlefield. I was pulled by Halent and waved, but the cheers from below suddenly erupted and even soared into the sky. What was surprising was that this hadn't been intentionally arranged. The cheers were far too real. At this moment, many thoughts flashed through my mind. My expression froze over, and I instantly realized that something was wrong with the situation. I immediately put on my standard Holy Night smile and waved down. And then, I was buried in the welcoming crowd. Amidst the chaos, I faintly heard some words that I paid attention to, such as reinforcements and front lines. This made me feel even more confident. 30 minutes later, we finally made our way out of the welcoming crowd. I asked a question before I even had the time to drink some tea. Halent, you actually want my arrival to be a political propaganda to boost morale? Is the Bardi Empire's situation that bad? Hearing this, Halent's stiff smile transformed into a bitter one. He furrowed his eyebrows and lightly massaged his forehead, intending to relax. As expected, I can't hide it from you. Yes, the situation is quite bad. There's a major chaos at the front lines. We've lost terribly. A serious undead emperor is 10 times more difficult to deal with than expected. Chapter 743. Bardi has a population of 180, so it's quite easy for them to defeat the undead with their flying dragons. Look, there are armored flying dragons and machine gunners, and human soldiers are everywhere. The undead don't even dare to fight, and their logistics haven't been activated yet. They'll definitely die if this continues. Oh my, they can't be healed to death. How can they be healed to death? Randomly raising flags. Damn it. I'm a professional commentator, all right? How can they be healed to death? Can a professional commentator not understand what's going on? 180 against 40, and Bardi has the wood spirits and the mage country's allies. Flying dragons in the sky, holy knight on the ground, and flying dragons and dogs on the ground. Bardi has the advantage in numbers. So how can they possibly lose? Tell me, how can they possibly lose when they're riding on the face with flying dragons? They can even win by brute force. Take this. Flying dragons ride on the face. They win. They can't possibly lose. Impossible. Something's wrong. Why are they being surrounded? Oh my, come on. Don't rush into a trap. How am I supposed to commentate if you step into a trap? Wait for the undead to come out before rushing. 1 second pause. I'm riding on the face. What do you mean by riding on the face? Even if you brute force, you can still win. Don't. Hey, even if the enemy throws a forbidden spell, you still charge. I can't commentate anymore. Oh my, this? Why is it like this? Don't make it so dangerous. Don't harm me. I can't bear such a crime. I can't bear such a crime. Let me calm down. Let me calm down. Let me calm down. This is an accident. This is definitely an accident. Damn it. This can't possibly happen. 3 against 1. 200 people. Against 40 people. How can I stand losing, How am I going to face life in the future? Am I really a jinx? Am I really the king of toxic milk? When Emperor Helent of the Bardi Empire told me about the situation on the front lines, I recalled a famous commentary from a certain infamous healer. Those who didn't know the joke could search for a story about a poison healer or a dragon riding on the face. The fast-paced commentary made me want to laugh, but I couldn't. It was quite difficult to hold it in. You didn't receive my information? After I reached an agreement with Sandro, I had sent information to my allies, revealing much of the undead army's internal information. It was truly incomprehensible that there would still be a problem with the information. Halland sighed and shook his head dejectedly. It's precisely because we learned that the undead emperors aren't on good terms with each other. One undead emperor has already gone missing, and two undead emperors aren't working hard at all. It's likely that the two undead emperors were our mortal enemies last night. That's why we decided to eliminate all of our potential enemies. Although it was a little exaggerated, the entire battle was developing just as the commentary had said. Bayer felt that he had a huge advantage. Bayer closed his eyes and sent all his soldiers to attack automatically. Bayer typed GG, surrender. Was he courting death? Or courting death? Or was he courting death? Against an undead emperor, I had actually planned on using only conventional military strength. I had intended to overwhelm the undead emperors with sheer numbers and then use multiple armies to charge at the undead emperors, only to be annihilated by forbidden spells and ambushes. The front line's military strength had been cut short, and I had been forced to retreat over 150 kilometers in one night. I had taken a great deal of damage to the undead emperor's morale. In fact, even my arrival had been used as propaganda to boost the undead emperor's morale. And all of this had happened even though the undead emperors were unable to work together as one. Halen's narration of the battle at the front lines was gradually reconstructed. Only two undead emperors had participated in the battle, Undead Emperor and Anna, the Witch of Eternal Slumber from the Darkness Plane, and Undead Emperor Shupness, the Undead Emperor from the Death Fog Plane, were both of the younger generation among the undead emperors. Neither of them had any astonishing combat achievements. At the very least, they hadn't accomplished any astonishing feats in the mortal plane. It could be said that compared to the other three famous undead emperors, most people were underestimating them. But they were still undead emperors, existences capable of turning the impossible into reality. They weren't famous not because they lacked power, but rather because there was no need for them to display their power. They didn't do anything unexpected. They still used the classic undead mage combination, a sea of undead with a support spell. However, what they did was on a completely different level from what ordinary undead mages could do. First, the undead emperors watched as their own army was destroyed by Bardi and led the enemy deeper in. Then, when the tremendous number of human warriors and several dozen dragons all arrived at the designated location, they started their ambush. The two undead emperors worked together to cast a spell and successfully tore through space, connecting the mortal plane to a certain undead plane. Then, a tremendous amount of negative energy surged out, slaughtering all living creatures like a flood. It was a pitiful scene. This was similar to how Aso had sacrificed his life to forcefully connect the undead planes to the mortal plane. The only difference was that the mortal plane's dimensional laws weren't too strict. With two undead emperors working together, along with sufficient sacrifices and preparations for the ritual, the ambush location was instantly corrupted into a land of the dead. But this was only the beginning. What came next was the usual undead army. Countless high-level undead walked out from the dimensional cracks. They began chasing after the fleeing living creatures and harvesting their souls. When the undead emperors had come to this plane, they had always come alone. Their armies were just cannon fodder that they could casually summon. But this time, it was two undead emperors' personal armies that had come. 80% of an ordinary undead mage's combat strength would depend on their undead subordinates. And as undead emperors stood at the peak of the undead world, they couldn't possibly be commanders without an army. Just think about Emperor Roland's red hunting hounds. It was easy to see how powerful the personal armies of undead emperors who had lived longer would be. The ambush location was a valley surrounded by mountains. The humans thought that they had trapped the undead in a corner, but they didn't expect that this was actually a death trap. By the time the sea of negative energy arrived, the complicated mountain terrain made escaping impossible. In a land of death, high-level undead massacred the humans. They only needed to set up checkpoints in key areas to prevent the humans from escaping, which would cause the living to drown in the sea of negative energy. There was no need to mention the pitiful situation on the battlefield. Of the 250,000 undead army, less than 50,000 managed to make it back to safety. Of the nearly 100 dragons that had participated in the battle, only 37 had died. Most of them were young dragons, while half were the newest magical battle dragons. And this was only the beginning of the trouble. The undead calamity that had taken so much effort to destroy had revived. Not only were there large numbers of powerful undead, the brave warriors who had just been on the side of the living had now become cannon fodder for the undead. The newest magical battle dragons had become the undead's armored bone dragons. This was a huge blow to morale. In this battle, the Bardi Empire had sent several 100,000 soldiers to the undead army, but it was still a complete loss. The Bardi Empire had plenty of resources and could afford such losses. In a few months, a new army could be formed, and they could still fight. After all, the Bardi Empire had been constantly losing over the past few years, so a little while longer wouldn't matter. But the worst part was that the crushing defeat had come too suddenly. A large number of wounded and deserters appeared on the battlefield. These people escaped to various major territories and cities, which inevitably exaggerated the undead's fearsomeness. After the news spread, the entire country fell into a panic, and everyone was anxious. My arrival also gave Howland a chance to calm the hearts of the people. According to his propaganda, I wasn't here on my own. Instead, I was here to help the entire Mist Alliance. Actually, he wasn't lying. Bardi's defeat had been too sudden, and all the allied countries' reinforcements were already on the way. By now, I understood what Helen meant. He was putting aside his pride and asking for reinforcements from his allies. For me, no matter if I should help or not, this was a difficult problem that would give me a headache. Chapter 744. Everyone knew that the Bardi Empire had an incredibly solid foundation. Destroying the Bardi Empire in a direct battle would be an impossible task, no matter how one looked at it. Even if the Bardi Empire could obtain a temporary victory, the Bardi Empire's vast territory and combat potential would still be there. With so many people and resources, even if the Bardi Empire wanted to conquer the Bardi Empire, it would take several years or even several decades. Take San Antonio, for example. Even if the Bardi Empire had internal strife and foreign invasions, the Bardi Empire would still be defeated for many years despite having such a solid foundation. Bardi's actual situation was actually much better than San Antonio's. Bardi didn't have internal strife and warlords, which were the most troublesome problems. Emperor Hellent had established a solid foundation for the Bardi Empire, and the international situation was excellent. Under Halent's leadership and the Southern Sect support, the entire country was improving. During this process, Bardi's combat strength would also increase. Its combat tactics would be improved, and its weapons and equipment would become more advanced. Bardi's population and social structure would become more inclined toward total war. The result of Bardi falling into a quagmire of war would be a competition of overall national strength and a meat grinder on the front lines. Bardi's allies wouldn't possibly sit back and watch as Bardi fell. However, it was possible to end the battle quickly against a small country. But against a large country, the only way to win would be to break the enemy's backbone from the very start and completely suppress them. Also, the enemy would be foolish enough to send out the main force of the entire country for the Bardi Empire to devour. Otherwise, the Bardi Empire would only be able to slowly devour the undead. However, the undead wouldn't have the time to do so. Everyone knew that the undead would only become stronger and stronger the longer they fought. But the more you fought like this, the less time your enemy would give you. Although Bardi had lost several 100,000 undead, when considering its territory and population, it was far from a serious injury. It was probably just that the Bardi Empire's reputation had been completely destroyed, and it urgently needed to save face to boost morale. Large countries could afford to lose. As long as they could regain their dignity in the end, they would be able to win everything back in one go. On the other hand, small countries wouldn't win no matter how much they won. If they lost in the end, they would go bankrupt. This was why war was known as a contest of comprehensive national strength. For large countries that had strategic buffer zones and resource reserves, it was very difficult to determine the final outcome of a single battle. Only small countries that lacked a solid foundation liked to gamble on their national fate. They would win the first round, win the second round, and finally lose one round when they couldn't hold on anymore. They would lose everything and have to spit out everything they had previously eaten. Most of the time, battles would be fought in logistics and internal affairs. As long as one could maintain stability, there would always be a day when one could win. And Barty's current situation was excellent, both internally and externally. The dragons and the introduction of new technology would make Barty's combat potential even stronger. Of course, if Barty was willing to sacrifice himself a few more times, anything could happen. After all, perhaps there was a limit to wisdom and diligence, but there was no limit to foolishness. Everything that happened now proved that Bayer wasn't that stupid. After suffering such a loss, the undead emperors no longer viewed the undead emperors as a group of several powerful individuals. Instead, they viewed the undead emperors as a powerful country, just like the undead emperors. While the undead emperors created public opinion and did their best to stabilize the situation, the undead emperors also prepared for an expedition to the south. However, the hundreds of thousands of newly born undead were actually quite easy to deal with. Those weak skeletons and zombies wouldn't even be able to defeat a simple militia that had undergone simple training. What the Barty people were slightly afraid of was the undead emperor's powerful mages. Several decades ago, the previous emperor of Barty had reformed the undead emperors and forced all mages to register as mages for the country's use. This had caused a conflict with the mage country, and many Barty mages had left the mage country. Plus, Barty didn't place much emphasis on raising mages to begin with, so Barty was only average when it came to top-level mages. The mage country, the Wood Spirits, the Northern Mist Alliance, the All-in Empire, and the Southern Sect were all requesting top-level experts, especially super-powerful mages, in order to counteract and counter the enemy's advantage of having multiple undead emperors. I had just defeated a Chaos main god, and the Mist Alliance was also supporting me. Since I was here, they naturally hoped that I would be able to help. In the end, it's all because of my title as the strongest Holy Knight. The Holy Knight had long been viewed as the natural enemy of the undead. Plus, I was an undead emperor, so it could be said that there was no one in the world more suitable than me to deal with the undead. It was only natural that Howlent would want to ask me for help. What gave me a headache was that not only would it be difficult to help, it might not even be a good thing. It would be quite difficult to calculate just how powerful an undead emperor was. At the very least, they would definitely have undead magic skills that far surpassed any ordinary undead lord. It would also be expected that they would have a tremendous number of high-quality undead armies. However, the most troublesome part would be their astonishing achievements in their own research fields. More than 90% of undead emperors were outstanding mages and researchers. They were vicious individuals who had reached the extreme in their own fields. If I dared to directly challenge an undead emperor without knowing their research fields or what magic they were skilled in, that would be the equivalent of closing my eyes and sending myself to die. Sandro's sincerity was trustworthy. He also briefly mentioned other undead emperors' research fields to me. Undead Emperor and Anna, the Witch of Eternal Slumber from the Darkness Plane, was said to have researched dreams. Even though undead were incapable of dreaming, she had created miraculous dream-related witchcraft. However, I felt that dreams were inextricably linked to the soul. Perhaps dreams were even a lower-level concept for the soul. It was highly likely that her research field would overlap with mine. Plus, she was the least experienced undead emperor out of all the other undead emperors, so she should be the easiest to deal with. Undead Emperor Shupness from the Death Fog Plane was only average in terms of experience and combat achievements. However, it was said that his research field was quite diverse, and he was quite skilled at creating composite undead products. His undead army was quite strong. My guess was that Shupness was most likely a mage who specialized in undead products. However, it was likely that he wasn't interested in the soul, but rather the undead's physical body. If it was possible, I would like to sit down and chat with these two undead emperors and exchange research information. Perhaps I would be able to obtain many new ideas and research ideas. But right now, it was quite a headache to be on the enemy's side. It would be foolish to treat the undead emperors as a united faction. The undead emperors were nothing more than a pile of loose sand. Some wanted to fight, some wanted to make peace, and some even asked, "Can I go back now?" Every day. They were basically a perfect clique. The good news was that only these two undead emperors truly intended to go all out against Barty. The bad news was that these two undead emperors were enough of a headache to deal with. Barty's corpses had already become cannon fodder for the undead emperors. Giving up on their grudges and ceasing to fight would only be something the victors would say. Barty would definitely do everything in its power to take revenge. Otherwise, it would be quite difficult to explain things to its citizens. The two undead emperors were unwilling to give up on the main battlefield. Since they had already reached this step, it would be impossible for them to step on the brakes. What followed would no longer be a battle of restraint and probing. It was highly likely that this would become a meat grinder where the Armageddon would begin. And if the undead emperors went all out, the other undead emperors would be in an awkward position. It was likely that they would all be dragged into the battle. I would never doubt my ability to taunt others on the battlefield. Perhaps I had only intended to be a bystander, only to end up becoming the focus of the battle. In that case, it was actually a good thing that I didn't go. That way, the situation wouldn't become even worse. However, it wouldn't be appropriate to refuse like this. Barty was an ally. After all, Barty's abundant resources would be the Mist Alliance's greatest lifeline. Sure, but I need to go to the mage country first. I have something to discuss with Archmage Akama, the true environment. Then, let's just delay it for now. It would take at least half a month for a round trip to the mage country. I wasn't lying, as Akama was the mage country's most outstanding prophecy archmage. I intended to ask him for some prophecies and calculations. However, Halen's expression was rather strange. It seemed that he wanted to laugh, but was holding it in. Only after quite a while did he cough lightly. Cough. Archmage Akama just arrived yesterday, and you're here today? It would seem that your luck is quite good. What? My luck is quite good? Your joke is so funny. Haha. Yep, my luck has always been quite good. Your Highness Roland, are you feeling sad? No, it's just that sand got into my eyes. I don't care about luck at all. Chapter 745. Now that I had settled down in Barty, the first thing I did was visit a single woman, and then she chased me out. Cough, that was a bit dirty. I only went to visit my sister-in-law. I had previously asked a Dragon Knight to send her to the Barty capital. It would seem that she was still angry at me. Leona's complexion was much better than several months ago. Perhaps it was due to her maternal instincts, but her expression was much gentler, and her cheeks were much rounder. You look much more feminine now. My words seemed a bit off, but this was indeed the most obvious change. At the very least, judging from how she didn't immediately draw her sword when she saw me, becoming a mother had indeed softened her attitude considerably. Although she was about 4 or 5 months pregnant, the bulge in her belly wasn't that obvious. It was also possible that her pregnancy cycle wasn't as long as a normal human's 10 months. All right then, I was just making things up. I was a single man, so how would I know what a pregnant woman would be like at each month? In order to avoid angering the pregnant lady, I left her a letter before leaving. I promised that I would go to the illusory reality Grandmaster Akama tomorrow to perform a divination. As for the fact that I had just met Carwins not long ago, I hadn't had the chance to tell her about it yet. Fine, I admit that I had forgotten to tell Carwins about Leona. I felt rather guilty now that I mentioned it. I had some rare free time as I walked on the streets of Barty. Scammers were always so particular and could come up with so many excuses and reasons. Being able to easily interact with them would actually make them seem less valuable. Being able to meet Akama tomorrow was already a great honor, and this was even with the help of the Truth Medallion. No matter what, I was still technically a member of the Mage Country's Truth Symposium. Actually, at this point, I didn't have much hope that Akama would be able to divine anything for me. Is Cavendish going to open the door? I didn't need to ask this question that I had originally prepared. How is he going to open the door? What's the main goal? Is there a way to stop him? This question would be valuable to me, but it was obvious that Akama wouldn't be able to divine anything. According to the basic rules of divination, yes and no were always the easiest questions to divine. The more specific the person, region, and time was, the greater the cost. And the more powerful the target was, the more the cost would be. This was like checking a person's household registration. It was easy to find out whether a person was a man or a woman, alive or dead. But if you wanted to know what he was thinking, where he was working, and whether he had homosexual tendencies, you would have to dissect his brain to find out. Divination was a skill, but asking the most suitable question for divination was an art of language. Especially after the god of fate broke the string of fate, all predictions of the future were like gambling on horses. But if you asked about the present, the more people who knew about it, the less difficult it would be. Also, the god of fate was on my side, so I should be able to get him to go easy on me. I was bored shopping while thinking about the most suitable question. Cavendish is looking for the Abyss girls? If this was true, it had already happened. Not only that, his subordinates and allies probably knew about it, so it probably wouldn't cost him much. And if I received a positive answer, I would ask the second question. Is finding the Abyss girls the most important thing for him right now? From another perspective, this question was basically asking if the Abyss girls were related to the dimensional wall door. That was because Cavendish's top priority was probably to open the dimensional wall door. My system already had some guesses about the Abyss girls, so it was necessary to confirm them. Will me staying here give Cavendish a headache? This question was quite abstract, but it was a question about the future. The more abstract and vague it was, the less energy it would cost. The answer would definitely be ambiguous, but as long as I obtained an answer, I would be able to make some suggestions about what to do in the future. And with Leona and me as the connection, this question would probably cost an acceptable amount of energy. Now, it was time for the main part. If I wanted to ask Cavendish's location in a roundabout way, I would have to analyze it based on the information I had. The most practical method would be to list out all the possible locations of Cavendish, as well as all the important strategic locations, and then ask yes or no. This was the correct way to use a prophecy. Those who immediately asked, "Where's the treasure?" who asked, "What's the Demon King's weakness?" would either be easily fooled by the prophecy or kicked out by the prophecy. I had pretty much decided on tomorrow's question. I felt much more reassured as I shopped around. I had been to the Bardi capital more than once already. This was the oldest city in all of Ike. It could be said that this was an incredibly important and prosperous city. Just by sitting in an outdoor coffee shop and watching the people and carriages hurrying by, I could more or less understand the current state of the city. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing for people to be in a hurry, as there was always something to be busy about. At the very least, everything was operating normally. The way I saw it, most of the people here had normal expressions and expressions. Very few of them were worried or in a hurry. In fact, some people would occasionally point at flying dragons in the sky with expressions of pride and joy. This was completely different from numbness and despair when facing a calamity. I was reassured to see this. At the very least, Barty's situation was still stable. If Barty's pillar of support collapsed just like that after San Antonio's problem, it would be far too severe of a blow to the citizens' morale. Barty wouldn't be able to take it anymore. Right, I have some bad news for you. The silly cat had recently been in a state of inactivity. It would seem that as the elven caravan moved closer and closer to the Northlands' elves had indeed been quite busy with government affairs. She had been focusing all her attention on her own elves. Sometimes I would hold her hand, and the expressionless young girl would follow me wherever I went. And then people would say things like, "What a cute little girl," or "How obedient, you're coming out to play with Daddy." Yet, I would happily reply with things like, "Isn't Ailey really cute?" or "Little girls are just afraid of strangers." This made her quite annoyed, and her mood instantly became much worse. By the way, I should mention that the age-deceiving bracelets were ineffective on her. That was because the designer of the bracelets had never considered that she would be tens of thousands of years old. Then, she would have a complete mental breakdown. She would even regret successfully leveling up. She was telling me that she had bad news at such a time, and with such a strange smile on her face. Could it be that someone else's misfortune would make her happy? This was far too normal. Guess who's leading the wood spirits reinforcements? You said it's bad news, Amelia. Didn't she go to the Northlands? Indeed, it's been more than 3 months. It's about time for her to return. Harloise continued to smile evilly. Originally, there were only 2 virtues, but Amelia immediately rushed over when she heard that you were here. That's a good thing. Our team has become even stronger. Ha, keep pretending. Last time, you intentionally stood her up. Don't run away if you dare. Haha, I have a clear conscience. Although that was what I said, I was currently considering whether or not I should hurry up and ask her questions before running away. Embark on a new journey. My previous promise to Howland had been too hasty. Yep, I should tell him about it when I returned. At this moment, 2 royal guards came to find me. They had nervous expressions, as if something had happened, and when they carefully whispered something to me, I confirmed that I was in trouble again. Your Highness Roland, His Majesty Hellent requests that you return to the palace. Prophet Akama has been assassinated. Half an hour ago, he met his own fateful day. What? He died? Chapter 746. There's only one truth. The murderer. The murderer is you. Death God Roland. You're the living omen, the bird of death who spreads misfortune and death. You're the legendary elite death god student who spreads misfortune everywhere you go. Just admit that you're the one who murdered her. Harloise, if I really had such an ability, you'd be the first to die. I don't mind your joke, but you should restrain yourself. If others really believe it. If new strange rumors start spreading tomorrow, I'll make you eat cat food for an entire month. Indeed, the current environment wasn't suitable for jokes. We were currently in the guest area of the Barty Royal Palace. Palace guards were nervously entering and exiting a room on the 3rd floor. An elderly man's corpse was already ice cold on the red oak floorboards. Prophet Akama was lying there with his eyes closed. However, his expression was quite calm. There were no signs of a battle. The only fatal wound was in his chest. He instantly ripped out his heart. He's an experienced assassin. I pulled off the white cloth covering the corpse and saw that there was a large hole in his chest. However, there wasn't much blood around it. Judging by how clean and efficient the attack was, it was obvious that Akama had been a professional assassin. No matter how powerful a mage was, it would be completely reasonable for an assassin to ambush them at close range and kill them in a single blow when they weren't on guard. However, this wasn't normal at all. Although it was common knowledge that prophets wouldn't be able to predict their own movements, prophecy and detection abilities were the natural enemies of assassins. It would be inconceivable for a veteran-level 4 mage like Akama to not have at least 10 or 20 prophecy spells on him. Detection, invisibility, enemy detection, heat scanning, automatic shields, and true luck. The slightest touch would cause a deafening alarm. It would be incredibly difficult to get close to a prophet. Even if it was me, it would be impossible for me to ambush a prophet. If it was me who really wanted to kill a prophet, I would rather bring my sword to his doorstep. That would be much easier. In such a situation, only a master of stealth would be able to sneak up behind the most famous prophet in the world, Akama, and kill him in a single blow when he wasn't on guard. My fingertips touched the corpse's skin, which was gradually freezing as dark magic gathered on it. I didn't have the reasoning abilities of an elementary death god, but I had some of the death god's tricks. In a magical fantasy world, it wasn't difficult to make the dead speak. The moment I summoned the soul, I met with resistance. Holy water? I've really met a veteran. The wet liquid on the corpse's cheeks should be the holy water. If it wasn't for the stupid priest who came to purify the corpse so quickly, then it was the assassin who splashed the holy water on the corpse. I've asked the guards around the perimeter, but no priests have arrived yet. That meant 2 things. First, the assassin was very experienced. He knew that the holy water could stop the soul summoning spell. This was common knowledge that most necromancers didn't know. The second point was thought-provoking. The assassin knew that the corpse would soon summon a soul, and knew that a necromancer would come to see the corpse. There were actually many limitations to the soul summoning technique that extracted corpses and the souls of the living. Corpses that had been dead for too long had already lost their vitality. It was possible to summon skeletons and zombies, but it was impossible to summon the memories of souls. Under normal circumstances, the soul would quickly return to the cycle of reincarnation. After 1 or 2 hours, even an undead master's soul summoning spell would likely fail. And if the soul summoning spell failed once, it could not be used again. Soul summoning spell extracted the memories of the target's soul shards. If the soul summoning spell failed once, the soul shard would completely shatter. Naturally, it would be impossible to summon the soul again. That was why most soul summoning spells targeted the living. More than 90% of undead mages would use this spell to interrogate the living. It was effective and consumed little energy, so everyone liked to use it. The side effect was that after the soul summoning spell was cast, the living would become the dead as well. Bardi was the center of the southern sect. Although the Bardi Empire didn't explicitly oppose or forbid undead mages, the large number of dragons and holy light job classes in Bardi made the Bardi Empire unfriendly toward undead mages. There weren't many undead mages in this country, and since the assassin had already been confirmed, an undead mage would soon arrive at the scene, which was why he had made such an arrangement. He knew that I was coming. From a certain standpoint, this clue might be even more valuable than the dead's words. The information from Soul Summoning Spell was scattered and insignificant. It was possible that I would learn something, or I would learn nothing. A spy? That's possible. I need to confirm it further. I waved my hand and got up. To be able to easily approach Archmage Howlent and obtain his trust, to be able to learn about my arrival, and to know about undead magic. Rather than a veteran top-level assassin of unknown origins, I was more suspicious of the other mages who came together with Archmage Howlent. It was likely that some of them didn't want me to know the truth. Howlent didn't seem to be in the Bardi Empire right now. He hadn't even returned from the Bardi Empire after the foreign envoy was assassinated. I recorded some of my deductions and the situation of the crime scene. I wrote a list and tossed it to one of the guards. I had him give 1 copy to Howlent and 1 copy to the Archmage from the Truth Symposium. As for finding out who the spy was, I didn't intend on interfering. That was because unlike detective stories where it would be easy to find out who the spy was, finding out who the spy was in this generation was incredibly difficult and troublesome. Traitors wouldn't write their betrayal on their faces. Randomly suspecting someone without any clear clues would only create more distrust and chaos. Even if there was a clue, you could accuse the traitor, but the traitor could also accuse you of framing the traitor. The mage's experience in faking the traitor would be so outstanding that even the mages themselves wouldn't be able to tell. The result would be that in the end, power and reputation would be the deciding factor. The victor might not be the real deal. The Truth Symposium had never been completely united. Many of the archmages here had come into contact with taboo magic and the Chaos Abyss. It was only natural that some of them would be related to the Chaos faction. Knowledge of taboo magic, the power of the Chaos Abyss, and truth would be more than enough as payment. Back in the day, Aso had been able to sneak into the Truth Symposium. Archmages from other species and factions would be able to do the same. I had long since guessed that there would be archmages who weren't on the same side as us. Now that the archmages had acted in order to cut off my investigation, this might not be a bad thing. A powerful archmage capable of killing Akama would definitely not be cannon fodder. Perhaps I would be able to dig out a nest of them. This would be quite troublesome, and it would be easy for me to get dragged into this mess as well. I didn't intend to get too deeply involved. Although this seemed to cut off all clues, prophecy magic was a major magic system. The mage country wasn't too far away, so I could simply look for other mages. This also confirmed one of my suspicions. I'm constantly being watched. Not only that, I've already come into contact with the Archmage's sensitive areas. They've been forced to take action. It was to be expected that I would be watched. However, this made me heave a sigh of relief. If I didn't spy on the Archmages, then the Archmages wouldn't care about me at all. That would mean that I wasn't a threat to them at all. It was now almost certain that the Chaos Girls were related to the Dimensional Door. In that case, I would probably need to start gathering information on the Chaos Girls. The simplest method would be to find an awakened Chaos Girl. What a headache. Eliza has been constantly contacting me. The silly cat, who would always comment on me, was currently remaining silent. I had been hesitating over whether or not to go find Eliza for the past few days. However, I had so many things to do, and nobody knew where Eliza was currently. Going there to find her probably won't be possible in just a few months. Actually, the fact that nobody knew where Eliza was already a great explanation. It was likely that she was no longer in this plane. It was impossible for her to go to the Chaos Abyss. In that case, considering her situation, the Fire Elemental Plane was the most likely location for her. However, the Fire Elemental Plane was vast and dangerous. If she wanted to hide from me, it wouldn't be an easy task. Forget it. Let's keep a close eye on Leona. My system had already confirmed that Leona was a Chaos Girl. Perhaps as long as I took her with me, I would be able to learn more about her sooner or later. I had so many trivial matters to take care of, and I didn't have any time to cultivate. Naturally, I would have to postpone creating my sword. As expected, if I wanted to cultivate, it would be better to find a remote mountain or forest. However, I wouldn't be able to have such an attitude right now. It was likely that the battle against the undead emperors was right around the corner. Helen was probably busy with this major event. I had far too few chips on hand. If I joined now, I would only be able to be a hired thug. If I lost, I would have to take the blame. If I won, I wouldn't get any benefits. Perhaps I wouldn't even be able to gain any favor from Helen. This wasn't what I wanted. However, there was no reason for me to refuse. Roland. Suddenly, I heard a voice. However, it didn't belong to my system or the noisy silly cat. This deep and low voice instantly helped me calm down. Boss Ale, you're awake? Chapter 747. When I heard AL's voice, I almost started crying. Why, you've finally woken up. Wonderful, wonderful. My voice was filled with sobs and exclamations. I had waited so long for this day. I'll leave all the trouble to you. I'm going to take a vacation for 2 weeks. No, 2 months, 2 years. Cough, please don't misunderstand. Although I was happy that Boss Ale had woken up, the happiest part was that the leaders of the Hades had woken up. They were in charge now, so I could finally get rid of my burdens. You should have spies to report to me, so I won't bother. I'll leave the undead emperors to you. I don't want to deal with them anymore. Over the past few years, the Hades have been in a rather passive position due to the fact that their leader, Ale, had entered an eternal slumber. From a certain standpoint, the leaders of the Hades were all in a similar position. This would normally be a good thing, but in times of war, it would be quite a headache. This wasn't some boring fight for power. It was just that each of the leaders was far too opinionated and had their own ideas. Whenever something was thrown up, everyone would have their own ideas, and it would take weeks or even months for a final decision to be made. For the past several years, the Hades had been in a state of confusion and helplessness. Normal operations were fine, but no agreement could be reached on how to actively interfere with He's mortal plane and do something practical. Although I was the representative of the Hades gods in the mortal plane, if we counted based on experience, I would probably be the last among the 300 Hades gods. And if we counted based on power level and combat achievements, at the very least, before I became level 4, I would be the last as well. Some wanted to make money, some wanted to observe the situation, and some felt that it was enough to protect the land of spring and the Hades, and that there was no need to interfere with the mortal plane too much. Not only did the Hades god speak up, there were also many powerful leaders who joined later on. The Hades Hell Dragon King Sam and the strongest Hell Dragon Evelyn, the guardian of the land of spring and the final boss of the Titan gods, and several powerful leaders of the Hades. In the mortal plane, all of them would be at least at the level of a main god. Previously, with air around, I had been able to command them as I pleased. But now, I could only ask for their assistance. The difference in power between us was quite significant. With people, there would be circles. With people, there would be circles. With people, there would be disagreements. With people, it would be strange if they always worked together. At this moment, as a basic employee, I felt a headache coming on. I finally remembered that in some government agencies and companies, there would always be those people who would only eat and not do anything. But when they were not around, the situation would become chaotic and there would be a lot of trouble. Sometimes, when an opinion or suggestion was thrown back, there could be several contradictory and conflicting methods. When a suggestion was thrown back, it would cause more and more headaches. Back when Ale was still around, I never expected such a situation to occur. ALS faction had always been called ALS faction for this reason. Without Ale to control the situation, everyone else would be nothing more than a pile of loose sand, especially since there were several new members of my team. This had nothing to do with power level or intelligence. This was how things had been for thousands of years. Everyone had been on the same level in the past. You weren't even as experienced as I was, so why did you have to be a leader while I was a foot soldier? I even beat you up 3,000 years ago. ALS awakening also meant that the Hades' scattered factions had finally been unified. The Hades, the ultimate force to save the world, could now fully interfere with the mortal plane. Maria, how did you die? However, ALS' first question was one that had nothing to do with him. It seemed that he really valued this adopted daughter of his. After Ale finished speaking, he fell silent. It seemed that Maria was really important to him. I recalled what happened in detail and mentioned the relationship between the Chaos Girls and the Dimensional Door. I also told him some of my inferences and suggestions. Ale finally received a response after a long while. Chaos Girl, why didn't you ask Bayana and the others? Bayana herself was once a Chaos Girl. At this moment, I felt like I'd been F***ed. Only now did I remember that there was a group of old antiques here, and they were most likely to know about ancient secrets. Why didn't I take the initiative to ask them? Was this what they meant by being in the dark under the lamp? The next instant, a large amount of information and knowledge was sent to me. Most of this information was ancient knowledge and memories. At this moment, I completely understood what type of existences the Chaos Girls were. Every Chaos Girl was actually an independent individual. Even if they were amazingly talented in certain areas, they would still be driven by their instincts to kill each other in the end. In this aspect, I discovered that my information was actually more detailed than ALS. It would seem that even the Chaos Girls themselves didn't know that the final victor would become Cynthia. They were simply driven by their instincts to steal their sisters' souls. I discussed the possibility of the Chaos Girls representing the Chaos Girls with Ale. As we talked, we started discussing future battle strategies. As one of the four pillar gods of the new Hades, Ale represented the pillar of death and was also the king of the dead. It was fated that Ale would be unable to leave the Hades, but that didn't mean that he couldn't interfere with the mortal plane. The leaders of the Holy Light faction were far too powerful, but they were also restricted by the natural laws of the Holy Light. They were also unable to directly descend into the mortal plane. However, they had already interfered countless times. The God of Holy Light had the Holy Light faction, as well as countless angel armies and upper dimensional armies. In the mortal plane, there was also the tremendous faction of the Holy Church. The Hades faction was the same. The Hades gods were only unable to leave the Hades due to their duties. However, the Hell Dragons were the messengers of the Hades, and they were able to move about freely. Due to the restrictions of magic, the Hell Gods and Hell Ghosts were capable of sending down clones and incarnations to interfere with the mortal plane. Most importantly, we still had the Titans and the native mortal armies of the Land of Spring, as well as the countless dragons for Dragon World. Just the Titans alone would be more than enough. Of course, the prerequisite was that I had to understand their thoughts so that they wouldn't end up becoming the enemy's helpers. Over the past few years, thanks to the hard work of the Titans who had the ability to create, the newly born Land of Spring had already developed quite well. The Titans had also become the guardian gods of this new land. From a certain standpoint, the Titans were now tied to the Hades' war chariot. However, the Titans had already exceeded the scope of their previous contract and would need to be renegotiated. This time, I was simply tossing out my request and problem. Now, I could let Ale and the others worry about it. It felt nice to have someone to back me up and take the blame for me. Previously, I had been worried about the unspoken rules. But now that the Holy Light faction and Chaos faction had both begun greatly interfering with the mortal plane, it was time for the Hades faction to follow suit. I sat next to a tea stall, basking in the sun and killing time. I was also waiting for the Hades gods to come to an agreement. With Ale taking action, it was likely that the final result would be 10 times or even 100 times more effective. Less than half an hour later, L's deep voice sounded in my ears, causing me to feel energized. The Hades faction is about to declare their existence. This battle against the undead emperors will be a stage for them. Don't worry and do whatever you want. I will personally act. Chapter 748. On the third day after Archmage Akama was assassinated, the Mage Country's spy was discovered. Transortal was a dark magus who was skilled at summoning death and talisman crafting. He was only one research result away from becoming a mage at the level of divine truth. It was discovered that he was directly connected to the Chaos Abyss. He was ordered by a certain Chaos god to assassinate his colleague, Archmage Akama. I wasn't curious as to how the spy was discovered. There were so many mages in the Mage Country, not to mention the Bardi Empire's professional mages. Not only that, the dragons even knew about the spy. It would be strange if the spy couldn't be discovered. Compared to the famous detectives in novels, which were known as the science of writing and the author's deductive abilities, the messy magic and supernatural abilities were more direct and magical when it came to investigating cases. Prophecy, astrology, lie detection, and so on. There was no such thing as inhumane or inhumane evidence. Whenever a suspect was captured, the suspect would be beaten half to death before being interrogated. Hallucinogens and truth-telling potions would be used to hypnotize the suspect. Unless the suspect directly self-destructed and entered the cycle of reincarnation, nobody would be able to escape. Indeed, there were many cases of wrongdoing due to excessive pursuit of efficiency. But in this situation, finding the spy as quickly as possible was doubtlessly the most important thing in order to appease the public. I received a simple message. Tramp basically admitted that he had been bewitched by the Chaos Abyss and attacked Archmage Akama. Trant, who was skilled in combat, had attacked Archmage Akama, who was skilled in divination and prophecy. If the ambush had been sudden enough, it would have been possible to kill Archmage Akama in one strike. However, many people would be unable to accept such a conclusion. Who was the true culprit? Was there someone else behind the ambush? There would definitely be many ideas, but there were no more clues. Since a major battle was imminent, it wouldn't be appropriate to conduct a large-scale investigation in order to not affect the morale of the army. The side effect was that everyone would be on guard against each other in the future. Halen's request went quite smoothly. Reinforcements arrived one after another. However, judging from how things were going, he probably viewed this as not just a battle between the Bardi Empire's allies, but also a demonstration of his international status and influence. See, these are our Bardi Empire's allies. From a certain standpoint, this was no longer a battle. It was more of a show, a large-scale commercial event that they absolutely had to win in an extravagant and dominating fashion. He had used a massive amount of resources and funds in exchange for the solid and powerful support of the allied countries. Whether or not it was worth it could be discussed later. At least for now, the scene was spectacular. The Truth Symposium sent 9 members, including that Akama from before. It's already in the double digits. This is simply 10 years ago, there had been a total of 28 Truth Overseers in the Truth Symposium. As the elemental tide increased, theoretically speaking, the profession with the greatest increase should have been the mages. Many of the research that had previously only been theories on paper became reality with the activation of the elemental tide. The result was that not only did several archmages instantly grasp the truth, their power also increased explosively. The current Truth Symposium had a total of 31 Truth Symposium mages. Although it didn't seem like there was a sudden increase in the number of mages, there were actually 12 new members. Don't be mistaken, mages weren't gladiators. The mages who had retired were only trying to shirk their responsibilities as members of the Truth Symposium. The members of the Truth Symposium were the highest authority in the mage country. However, for many mages who specialized in research, the Truth Symposium was nothing more than endless trouble. Mages would have to use their research time to deal with boring government affairs. Although they could take advantage of the Truth Symposium to embezzle some research funds, it still wasn't worth it. Apart from the archmages who spent tremendous amounts of research funds, the other archmages didn't care much about this position. Since there were juniors who were willing to take the position, they were naturally willing to give up their positions. Many archmages would even try to trick their juniors or disciples into taking over their positions. However, some things were publicly acknowledged. The mage country of Arladin's overall combat strength was at least twice as powerful as it was 10 years ago. The mage country of Arladin had benefited the most from the elemental tide. Not only did the mage country of Arladin's overall combat strength increase, the mage job class, which was originally the most difficult job class to advance in power level. But after the elemental tide increased explosively, the mage job class's difficulty in advancing in power level became ridiculously low. In fact, there were even several hundred mages who simultaneously advanced in power level every single day. Another reason for the exponential increase in elemental power was that many forbidden and imaginary creations from blueprints and ancient books could now be transformed into reality. Alchemists and marionettes were having fun every single day. Summoners could summon creatures from other planes that even they themselves couldn't deal with. Even the forbidden undead mages had greatly increased their power level with the establishment of the Hades. Originally, the mage country was pitifully small despite being a mega empire. Their combat strength depended entirely on the mages. Now that the mages' power level had increased explosively, the mage country's power level had naturally increased explosively as well. Saying that the mage country was twice as powerful as it was 10 years ago was a conservative estimate. Unfortunately, some things still hadn't changed, such as how the mage country of Arladin was organized according to the most recent records. After so many years, the mage country should have more than 200 mages who had reached the truth rank. However, less than 50 of them were actually capable of contacting each other, and less than 30 of them were capable of being dispatched. Not to mention, all of them were dispatched in exchange for favors, knowledge, and so on. In such a situation, the mage country had dispatched 10 truth rank mages, along with several truth rank mages who hadn't become truth rank yet. It could be said that more than half of the mage country's strongest combat strength had been dispatched. Such generosity. What benefits did Hallant give them? Don't tell me it's something like ceding territory to the mage country. No, the mage country's territory is nothing more than a burden to them. It's probably some ancient knowledge or something like that. Anything that can make these old fellows come out in full force is definitely something extraordinary. I muttered to myself as I observed the archmages before me. It was currently a royal banquet that Hallant had organized, and many foreign guests had arrived. Due to certain things in the past, such as Hallant acting atrociously at the Truth Symposium several times, I meant having friendly interactions with the Truth Symposium, many of whom were old acquaintances. The mystical Blades Aloso, an ice mage who was one of the rare good people among archmages, was currently seriously licking a strawberry-flavored ice cream produced in Bart. When he saw me looking at him, his face instantly reddened as he turned around and lowered his head to continue licking. Marguerite's teacher, Star Revelation's Auntie Umla, who always pretended to be young. I meant Sister Umla, who was eternally young and beautiful. Please retract the demon in the shadows. A white-bearded old mage whom I didn't recognize was smiling at me while proudly pointing the truth emblem on his chest. Who are you? Don't act so familiar. You, Roland? I'm Cade, the Earth Archmage Cade, your old classmate for so many years. Lilicon Cade, you're still alive? Are you here to return the 100,000 gold coins I owe you? Of course I'm still alive. I wouldn't die even if you turned into dust. No, wait, it's only 100 gold coins. Oh, wait, you're the one who owes me money. I was almost led astray by you. Ah, you're doing this again. I'm not a lolicon. What's wrong with liking little girls? No, wait, I'm not a pervert. Such a familiar stream of comments. As expected of a lolicon Cade. I looked at the white-bearded old man with sympathy, and then in a friendly manner, I handed him a drink. He was already quite old, and had spoken too much in one go, so he was already choking and coughing. However, he didn't notice that his companions had silently distanced themselves from him. Once he returned, it was likely that all the little girls would avoid him. Ha, ha, to think that you still have a conscience. What's this? Before he could finish his sentence, he collapsed. When he collapsed, his old face was still red and hot. I looked at the label. Oh, dwarf and tight wine? The famous dragon slayer wine? Who would throw such a thing at a banquet? I looked at the elderly mage who was lying on the ground with a mysterious smile on his face and the strange expressions of everyone around me. I felt that from tomorrow onwards, not only would all the little girls and girls stay away from Cade, even all the women would stay away from him. Pitiful Cade. I made a cross in front of my chest as a form of praying for him. The most pitiful thing about him is that he got to know you. As always, the silly cat's comments were timely. But today, she was quite different from before. She had a proud smile on her beautiful face, and her long blonde hair was as smooth and beautiful as silk. Her black formal attire matched her golden moon earrings quite well, making her seem noble and mysterious. As the Empress of the Elves and a truth-level archmage, she was doubtlessly the center of everyone's attention. And in consideration of the elves' diplomatic image, she could only appear like this in public. But doubtlessly, it was easier for others to view her as an adult. As far as I was concerned, only some of the truth-level mages were familiar with me. But for Harloise, there were probably only a few people she wasn't familiar with. She could casually call out the archmage's nicknames and talk about their scandals from when they were acolytes without hurting their reputation. Everyone around her would laugh at her, as expected of an old fox who had lived alone in the mage country for so many years. After adjusting her age, Harloise was able to utilize her past advantages and quickly became friends with the truth-level mages. Her astonishing knowledge and connections made people sigh in admiration. There was already a circle of people surrounding her. For most mages with unique personalities, this was an incredibly rare opportunity to get along well with others. Actually, I was quite famous in the mage world. Not only was I an undead archmage and an ice mage, I had also publicly prophesied the dangers of the holy war in the Cloud Tower and promoted magical engineering technology, which left a deep impression on the mages. And as my prophecy was proven to be true and magical engineering technology was gradually proven to have limitless possibilities, I naturally obtained the fame I deserved as an outstanding prophet. And after I killed Cade, the archmage who had originally intended to chat with me wisely kept his distance. In this day and age, even pets were more popular than their masters. While I was having a rare moment of free time, a familiar child's voice sounded behind me, causing my scalp to go numb. Dad, Mom invites you over. Chapter 749. Dad, Mom wants to invite you over. I turned around to see one of the 7 virtues, Rosa, looking at me with undisguised longing and love in her eyes. Her cute face had a sincere smile on it. She was so cute. If it wasn't for the fact that the environment wasn't suitable for her, I would have raised her up high and then taken out a lollipop. And then you'll get the same treatment as that lolicon over there. Are you carrying snacks with you to entice young girls? You really are all perverts, a nest of snakes and rats. The silly cat actually managed to take this opportunity to retort. However, I still couldn't bear to see Cade's ugly state as he lay on the ground. Was there really not a single kind-hearted person who dragged him off the stage? Annie Amal walked over. What a nice person, as expected of Marguerite's teacher. Why did you step on him? You even stepped on his face. You were so vicious. Should I say that as expected of Marguerite's teacher? And then I really couldn't bear to watch anymore. Hey, Cade, what's with that mysterious smile of yours even after being stepped on? I didn't notice that you had such a hobby back in the day. Dad, behind me, the cute Rosa frowned and pouted, as if she was dissatisfied that I had forgotten about her. Actually, It wasn't that I had forgotten about her. I was just doing my best to pretend that I didn't see Senpai glaring at me from the corner of the wall. Cough, cough, little Rosa, try this ice cream. Finn's strawberry ice cream is a specialty of Barty. Didn't you see how happy that fat grandpa, uncle, is eating it? It's already his 15th bowl, and he's still licking his glass. Is the food in the Cloud Tower really that bad? My last complaint was slightly louder than usual, so probably everyone heard me. And then I was delighted to see Master Aloso's face instantly turn red, and then he turned around and continued eating. When he didn't finish eating for long, Annie Umlaw's expression turned serious as she went to look for that fat elder who had embarrassed the mages. Tisk, TSK, TSK, he actually ran out of the living room and even took the remaining 5 ice creams with him. Honestly, I felt like I was being especially shameless today as I looked at these shameless archmages. Roland, how much longer are you going to pretend that you didn't see me? However, the familiar voice behind me sent a chill down my spine. I slowly turned around. That familiar green color was giving off a nostalgic anger. Roland, you better go see a neurologist. You're really becoming more and more like the one lying on the ground. Shut up, silly cat, or I'll turn you into a young girl right now. You have to get through this first. The silly cat probably didn't want to embarrass herself in front of her colleagues, so she retreated. However, this only gave me an even greater headache. He slowly turned around and put on a well-practiced social smile. He scratched his head and squeezed out a sentence. Senior sister, you're really beautiful today. It wasn't a bad idea to praise a well-dressed woman first. Furthermore, I wasn't lying. Unlike her usual plain attire, the senior sister was wearing a light purple silk dress today. There were mysterious facial lines on her pretty face, making her look dignified and mysterious. Her green hair, which was originally slightly curly, was straightened to her waist. Unlike the other noble women attending this banquet, Amelia didn't wear any precious metal jewelry on her body. However, the fresh flowers on her head, the green vines on her arms, and the grass garlands on her bare feet were all mystical jewelry that had a natural artistic style. She wore a pair of gold-rimmed eyeglasses, which made her seem less glaring. If it wasn't for the fact that no one attending this banquet was an ordinary person, perhaps someone would have already tried to hit on her. Today, Amelia was quite special. She was quiet and beautiful, and even seemed slightly motherly. If I had to find an adjective to describe her, I would probably have to use the cliched nature goddess or forest fairy. But now, this originally quiet forest fairy was angry as well. She was glaring at me with displeasure, but the next instant, she smiled again. Since you're praising me sincerely, I'll forgive you for now. Since when did my senior sister become so easy to talk to? I told her to go to the Northlands, but she stood me up, and she forgave me just like that? Of course I won't let you off so easily. Promise me one thing. I paused in surprise, but silently nodded. As expected, my senior sister wasn't so understanding. Roland, I know several excellent psychiatrists. You should go take a look. Silly cat, shut up. However, Amelia smiled. Unlike before, this smile was very faint, making it hard for others to see it clearly. Come to the Forest of Dreams in the future when you have time. Jill has already said many times that Daddy has other children and doesn't love us anymore. Samantha has also secretly looked at your portrait and cried several times. Although those children are independent and stubborn, they actually lack fatherly love. At the very least, come often. Someone was currently pulling on my shirt. I looked down to see Rosa's pitiful expression as she tried to hold back her tears. I'll cry for you if you don't agree. This was a wordless threat more powerful than anything else. At this moment, I was petrified. Fatherly love, responsibility. I panicked, I really panicked. Then Amelia gently helped me tidy up my untidy shirt. She got closer to me and lightly rubbed her red lips against my cheek. Amelia then directly left with Rosa, leaving behind me in a state of complete confusion and petrification. I was also viciously criticized by everyone. Roland, you're just as perverted as that Cade. No, you're even worse, scum. Your child is already so old, yet you're still fooling around outside. Auntie, you're an archmage, yet you don't know what a wood spirit is? Can you not lie through your teeth? Angel Amelia, my eyes. That archmage was actually vomiting blood. It would seem that the legendary Angel Amelia's fan club was going to place a bounty on my head again. My hands are burning. Burn this scum. My ice mage friend, when did you learn how to make fireballs? It's fine if you make fireballs, but at least don't set your sleeves on fire. Ha ha ha. Roland, you finally have such a day. You scum who always tries to screw me over. You deserve this day. This person was Cade, who had been laughing out loud in public while everyone else was whispering and pointing at him, causing the mages to lose all face. He had been courting death for over 100 years without wavering. Cade was currently shivering from the cold after Annie Amelia used a layer of sleet to sober him up. Now, he was pointing at me arrogantly and laughing out loud. But he didn't notice that Annie Amelia was so angry that she was rolling up her sleeves. I felt that it wouldn't be long before all the archmages in the town of Wrath would have to learn a new required class: mage diplomatic etiquette and self-cultivation. Today's humiliation would serve as the best example, with Aunt Umla as the representative of the idiotic archmages in the town of Wrath. Today's senpai is somewhat different. I muttered to myself as I watched Senpai's back. But right after that, a tall, fair-skinned female elf rushed over and seemed to say something in an intense manner. Senpai seemed to respond with a few words, but the silver-haired high elf seemed to be dissatisfied. He even started to pull at Senpai. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the floor was directly pierced through. If I recalled correctly, this was the first floor, and below us was solid granite. If that female elf was still intact, she would probably be buried underground as well. Senpai retracted her smoking fist and viciously glared all around her, dispelling all the curious gazes around her. Your Majesty, a male voice behind me sounded rather excited. He was probably the only one who would call me that. Reinhardt, you're here. I turned around and saw that it was indeed that familiar face of mine. The Black Knight, Overlord, was staring at me with an overly passionate gaze. Behind him was a short, middle-aged man with a perverted expression. I remembered this face. He was the former first senator of Shilaw, the most shameless bone dragon, Grakajo. Thank you for your hard work. Eat something and get some rest. As I ordered the undead to eat, I kept feeling like I was forgetting something. Wait a moment. If Shilaw's people were here, then could the one who was hammered into the ground just now be the bone dragon Queen Gria? I looked at the large hole in the ground and Senpai, who was obviously still angry. I considered what Gria might have said for 2 seconds, as well as the possibility that Gria might take out her anger on me. I wisely decided to forget about Gria. This time, Sheila's undead army was here as reinforcements for the Mist Alliance. The Mist Alliance was paying for their ally, Barty. My previous undead army was actually split into 2 main groups. One group consisted of the Mist Kingdom's main forces, with Bex and the Red Hunting Hounds as the main forces. During the Battle of the Hades, most of them had chosen to stay in the Hades. The rest were either in the Mist Kingdom or returned to the cycle of reincarnation after the Battle of the Hades. The other group consisted of my subordinates from when I was still young. Harlois, Grakajo, Reinhardt, Gria, and the other undead senators were all my subordinates. They had their own lives and goals. Although they obeyed me and fought for me, they were different from the Red Hunting Hounds, who were like family and retainers to me. I could make them sacrifice themselves for me, but I was unable to make them stay in the Hades forever for me. In the end, most of them stayed in the Mist Alliance. And now, although only a few undead lords had come, nobody would know their enemies better than them if they had to fight against an undead army. Of course, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they were here to support me. In order to achieve my strategic goals, they would be absolutely necessary. Reinhardt, Gria, and Grakajo were the only remaining undead in Shiloh. However, unlike Reinhardt and Gria, who had always been loyal, Grakajo's power level was definitely the strongest. However, he was also the most unreliable and unreliable, as well as the least reliable of them all. He was fine if he fought with the wind, but if he met with even the slightest danger, he would either flee or surrender. He had just arrived, but not only did he not greet me, he even hid behind me and looked around nervously. It was as if he didn't feel safe at all since there were powerful experts here. Suddenly, Gracio's expression changed as he screamed. Impossible! Impossible! Harlois, you actually took that step? This was yet another unexpected situation. Everyone's gazes followed the direction of Gracio's finger to look at Harlois in the crowd. Reinhard also looked over, but he instantly paused in surprise. After a while, he couldn't help but mutter to himself, Your Majesty? This, Your Majesty, didn't have the same level of respect as before. Instead, it referred to Gracio's one and only status, the highest position in the undead world. Undead Emperor, some of the more knowledgeable people added on. For a moment, the archmages who were truly knowledgeable about the undead world all sucked in a cold breath. The circle that was originally surrounding Harlois instinctively retreated. Harlois was also astonished at first, but then she condescendingly glanced over at Gracio, her old enemy who was ranked higher than her, and revealed a proud smile. Yes, I'm now an undead emperor as well. This is the benefit of following boss. No, it's the benefit of warming boss's bed every night. Are you jealous? Harlois, I know that you're quite proud of showing off in front of your old enemy, but what did you mean by that last sentence? Why did you say that to Upanishad? Ah, she's glaring at me. You silly cat, you're trying to murder me. Chapter 750. What was an undead emperor? There is probably no need to explain just how difficult and inconceivable it was for an undead emperor to appear, nor would there be any need to explain what undead emperors represented. All of us level 4 individuals had teamed up together in order to kill 2 undead emperors. Although it seemed rather foolish to categorize powerful individuals into levels, the undead emperors were probably the most difficult to categorize. It was impossible to estimate how dangerous an undead emperor was. His Majesty was the title that the intelligent undead revered towards the undead lord who had ascended to the throne. Dozens of undead lords viewed the path to the heavens as an insurmountable obstacle. Of course, the most accurate way to describe an undead lord would be the way people viewed them. Calamities. Apart from very few exceptions, every time an undead emperor appeared in the mortal plane, it would be a calamity for all living creatures. The undead emperor who ascended to the throne would summon the restless undead lords in the darkness to form a new undead army that would sweep through the entire world. Then, it would be a world-scale war. Unlike the Holy War, the Calamity War would be less intense, but it would affect a much larger area. If the Calamity War wasn't stopped in its infancy, the losses would be astronomical. If you look through the history books, there were plenty of such examples. The final result would usually be the undead emperor's defeat and death. However, very few undead emperors were directly killed. Many escaped to other planes. The negative energy, ice, or poison mist planes that the living couldn't reach gradually became planes that belonged solely to the undead. Were there any undead emperors who didn't cause trouble? As far as I knew, apart from the Undead Republic special situation, there were no other undead emperors. This was partly due to the undead status in the mortal plane. Also, the undead were naturally stubborn. Very few of them would be normal once they reached the peak. Then, when an undead emperor truly appeared, the undead lords would have waited for several decades, or even centuries. How could they possibly miss such an excellent opportunity? It was precisely because undead emperors were the true rulers of the undead that they had the power to summon undead lords. That was why they were called emperors, and why all undead would respectfully address them as Your Majesty. From another perspective, the undead's respect for undead emperors also reflected the irreconcilable conflict between the living and the dead. The undead also desired to be saved and to have their own country. They desired the existence of an undead emperor. It was only when the undead emperors appeared that they began leading the undead against the order gods and the chaos evil gods to create their own country. Although undead emperors were only semi-god level existences in name, even new undead emperors will be able to easily defeat low gods. Even when it wasn't a holy war, new undead emperors would have super combat strength capable of easily suppressing ordinary semi-gods. They would be demon kings that teams of undead emperors would have to challenge. Every time an undead emperor appeared, it meant that the conflict between the living and the undead had reached its climax. It was time for the undead to harvest the souls of the living. The most recent time was more than 100 years ago. They even defeated the Holy Church's allied armies and almost destroyed the world of the living. Not only that, they didn't suffer any losses even after their defeat, and they even successfully established a country of the undead. They were also one of the most powerful existences in history. I don't need to mention the specifics. A hero doesn't boast about his past achievements. Just a little bit more. Next time, I will definitely turn the entire world into a nation of the undead. Actually, only the undead emperors themselves knew that this little bit of difference was an almost insurmountable gulf. Unless the entire order and chaos factions were completely overturned, it would be impossible for a country of the undead to exist. That would mean that the cycle of reincarnation would lose all meaning. What meaning would there be in a country where everything was stagnant and unchanging? There were no idiots among the undead emperors. After the undead emperors understood all this, some became dispirited and hid in their own undead planes, while others began focusing on their own research and breeding undead. But from a certain standpoint, as long as the undead still existed in this world, their unwillingness and resentment would continue to give birth to intelligent undead. Evil people would need their own saviors, and the undead would need their own masters. Every undead calamity's severity depended on the undead emperor's personal power level, as well as how long it took for an undead emperor to appear. Although it was quite difficult to understand, the longer it took for an undead emperor to appear, the more undead lords there would be. Every undead lord would be like an army of various sizes, which would be even more terrifying when accumulated. The reason why the Yongya calamity had nearly destroyed the world was because it had been more than 500 years since the last undead emperor had appeared. The Yongya calamity had accumulated for far too long. Although humans were the most common undead emperors in the past, the ogres and elves were the ones who suffered the most. After all, compared to the long-lived species, humans' lifespans and history weren't that long. A history of less than 2,000 years would be a grand epic passed down by 40 to 50 generations of humans. Genealogies could be long and unreliable, but for the long-lived superior elves, it was a realistic story that they could finish reading. What the undead emperors hated and feared the most was the appearance of a new undead emperor somewhere. Undead emperor. How is that possible? The last undead calamity was only a little more than 100 years ago. Everyone's reactions were quite amusing. Some were afraid, some were on guard, and some were prepared for battle. Although revealing Harlow's power level in order to gain the upper hand was within my expectations, I was still rather displeased to see the silly cat so pleased with herself. Why did things become like this? This is the first time I've ever had a pet, as well as a lifelong confidant. These two joys overlapped with each other, and these two joys brought even more joy. I should have already obtained a dreamlike, blissful time, but why did things become like this? It's me. It's me who came first. I was clearly the one who came first. No matter if it's becoming an undead emperor, being cursed with fear, or becoming the focus of the entire world. I don't need you guys to fight me. I'll go out by myself. I couldn't make up any more stories. This really wasn't something a human could do. Scholars like Professor Bai really should be dragged out and beaten to death. Judging from Amelia's expression, if I delayed any longer, she might actually drag Harlow's out and nail her into a coffin. The situation instantly became chaotic, but I laughed. The current situation was indeed quite good. Halland had gathered the strongest individuals from every country to fight against an undead emperor in order to show off his charisma and confidence. As the host and leader of the Undead Alliance, he needed to show off his superior power. Otherwise, his invisible status in the Undead Alliance would decrease. This was a crisis, a chance to redeem his reputation and improve his status. The other allied countries hadn't sent so many powerful individuals just to be bystanders. In a way, this was the first time our undead alliance had ever sent out such a large number of powerful individuals. The right to speak would need to be supported by power and combat achievements. The status of a major country wasn't something to be boasted about, but rather fought for. Allying together was the best way to show off one's power. Shilua's undead lords would be at an absolute disadvantage against an undead emperor on the battlefield. In fact, they might even become a weakness. However, I still wanted them to come, because this was the Mist Alliance's territory. Originally, I still hadn't understood why the mage country had sent out such an extravagant group of archmages, and Amelia had personally led the wood spirits. This was quite obvious. This was a silent and peaceful competition. During the Holy War, it was possible that we would have a large-scale allied battle at any time. The results of this first allied battle would directly affect the right to speak and command in the future. Nobody would be foolish enough to try to preserve their strength at such a time. Showing off your strength at such a time would also make it easier for you to interact with other countries in the future. That way, no one would be so shameless as to think that you were afraid of them. Even the Bardi Empire, which was currently in a state of war, had sent out troops. However, their airships were still on the way. I knew that the host, Hellent, had prepared a mega ace that would be able to control the situation. However, I was also confident that no matter what Hellent brought out, it wouldn't be as eye-catching as 2 undead emperors and several top-level undead lords. And this was only the first ace I had. As expected, Halent's expression became rather strange when he heard that the Mist Alliance's Elven Empress had successfully become an undead emperor. However, the next instant, he returned to his usual calm smile. 10 years was more than enough time for a pure soldier to evolve into a qualified politician. Bardi couldn't afford to lose this war by making the situation so grand. If they lost again, not only would they lose their citizens' hopes and actual benefits, it would also greatly damage Bardi's political status as a mega-empire. He's still too inexperienced. He's just like a child who obtained a high-quality toy and is in a hurry to show it off to his friends. How much is face worth? With Bardi's powerful foundation, there's no need for them to do anything at all. Their status is already there, so why gamble? If I were in Halent's position, I would silently finish the battle first before doing anything else. If they win, they'll advertise, and if they lose, they'll think of something else. The effects won't be that much different. It's easy to say as a bystander. Actually, it's all your fault. Harlow's soul language surprised me. What did this have to do with me? Haven't you ever thought about how much pressure the Mist Alliance and your improvements have put on Hellent? Back in the day, Bardi was the leader, and the Mist Alliance was just a small country in a remote region. What is the Mist Alliance now? What is Bardi? While it's nice to surpass others, it's not necessarily so for others to surpass you. As the leader of Bardi and the heir to the Scorpion Empire, how could a professional like you possibly understand the heavy burden on Halent's shoulders? The silly cat's words were so reasonable that I couldn't refute her. However, I felt even more pessimistic as I looked at the number of powerful individuals before me. It felt like several decades had already passed since Bardi's previous defeat. Now, they were discussing the battle results and medals. Only undead emperors would know just how ridiculous an undead emperor could be. Did these undead emperors really believe that they had won? Weren't they underestimating their opponents? There were no absolutes in this world. I had seen plenty of undead emperors who believed that they would definitely win before going to war. Perhaps I should find an excuse to delay for a few more days before heading out. Don't say any more. Since you're such a jinx, I definitely won't be the first to go to the front lines. Harloise was actually so confident in me. Cough. I meant that she wasn't confident at all. This time, I was clearly quite confident. Confident that something unexpected will definitely happen. All right then, Harloise had guessed correctly yet again. Now, what excuse should I find to delay?